Chapter 2397. Taoist Sin was dumbfounded. What's an amusement park? A brothel? Lu Xiaoyi chuckled. What I mean is that we'll build hell into a large-scale amusement park. We'll include roller coasters, Ferris wheels, bumper cars, merry-go-rounds, pirate ships, pendulum rides, void walks and so on. I'll give you the blueprints later. With the 10 official seals, we'll be able to unleash the full might of the 10 halls of hell. With so many human resources, construction will be much easier. With several strokes of his pen, he drew out the blueprints of several gaming facilities. Taoist Sin immediately understood what these things were for. Meaning? Lu Xiaoyi chuckled. Use happiness to replace punishment. Transform the 18 levels of hell into an amusement park. Arrange a theme for each level, coupled with a large number of entertainment facilities. Then, don't you think the effect will be better than skinning people? Once they leave hell, they won't remember anything, but the punishment will leave a latent tyrannical and repressive tendency in their mind. If they're in the mortal realm and in a good environment, these tendencies won't emerge, and they'll eventually fade away amidst their blissful times. But if the environment isn't satisfactory, and they're frequently exposed to hunger, war, oppression and injustice, these repressive instincts in their subconscious will slowly be released, and the result will be a life of evil. What we have to do is to let their souls heal under the sun and amidst their happiness. We have to plant more positive tendencies in their subconscious, to live happily and face life bravely. If we can do this, then even if these souls experience setbacks after reincarnation, they'll still view life positively and face difficulties, and not take risks out of desperation. Then, don't you think we'll be changing the nature of hell? Let this place truly become a meaningful existence, making it a happy rest stop in the process of reincarnation that makes the world better and brighter, and not adding to the already heavy spirits of many people? What's the point of doing this? Taoist Sin murmured, You're crazy. You really dare to think of anything. This is completely deviating from the orthodoxy. Lu Xiaoyi scoffed. Not only do I dare to think of it, I even dare to do it. What do you mean by deviating from the orthodoxy? The universe had rebelled, and the immortal court had been reshuffled. Why couldn't the underworld rebel? Old Sin, this isn't a discussion with you. If you can't figure it out, think about it as you go. Taoist Sin fell into deep thought. He had to admit that the swordsman's method was far more shocking and subversive than his patchwork of hell's laws. This was because this suggestion had completely changed the nature of hell, from punishment to reward. As a former immortal, his thoughts were not stale, and he was even more adept at judging gains and losses. Truth be told, Qin Yi was well aware that the things he had set up would never be able to completely reverse the situation in hell. All he could do was alleviate and adjust the situation to a certain extent. Therefore, the amount of merit he could obtain was very limited. But this swordsman's method was different. That was truly a perfect match for the arrival of a new era. A new era, a new universe, and a new underworld. If they failed, then there was no need to say anything. Everyone was on their own now. If he succeeded, he would become one of the founders of the new hell, and the legacy he would enjoy would last for the rest of his life. 1,000,000 years, 10,000,000 years. If he really succeeded, with this merit alone, he would at least be able to become a human immortal, because it would benefit the common people and leave a legacy for all generations. This gamble was a little too big. That said, his heart was burning with passion. As long as one was a cultivator, who could possibly give up on such a temptation? We can't just play around like this for decades, can we? If he keeps spinning the Ferris wheel like this, he might be happy, but sooner or later he'll turn into a fool and his brain will turn to mush. Of course we can't just keep spinning like this. Lu Xiaoyi waved his hand dismissively. Happiness is a means. Excessive happiness will eventually lead to numbness, and the amusement park will eventually become a punishment ground. It's disgusting. We'll have to set up various reading clubs, hobby groups, even large-scale workshops. Every occupation, every direction, from farming and animal husbandry to craftsmanship, we have no shortage of talents in these areas. There are countless elites in the living souls of various industries and professions. We're not going to pursue the development of some advanced civilization. Rather, we're just going to give them a way to pass the time. When they're idle, they'll easily overthink things. Then, in the process, we'll reward the most outstanding ones with the right to play in the amusement park. Among them, those with good temperament and willingness can even be given a position in hell. But we can't continue to insist on the old ways of hell. We'll have to abolish gold, silver, jade, and wooden planks. We'll tell them that their future depends on their own efforts, and not on their birth. These theoretical things have to be straightened out. I've already touched on some of these things in my confrontation with Granny Meng. You'll have to perfect them. Taoists looked puzzled. We can have these reading clubs, but won't they be more inclined towards theoretical, moral, and ideological? Will this purify their souls and give them the ability to maintain a positive attitude under pressure? Lu Xiaoyi shook his head. You're wrong. Illusory things are illusory. The premise of everything is that they have to eat their fill before reincarnating in the mortal realm, get married, and have a family. These are the cornerstones of stability. Moral thinking can't help with these things. Do you think it's better to have more thinkers in this world? Or do you think it's better to have more practical people? Taoistsen was embarrassed. Of course it's better to have more practical people. Those so-called ideas can only make people feel at a loss and even lead to evil cults. Lu Xiaoyi lowered his voice. Then what do you think the golden immortals, or even the heavenly Tao would prefer to see prosperity and well-being? Or would they prefer to see the emergence of countless thinkers in the universe who might challenge the world? Taoistsen was shocked. This was the crux of the matter. No ruler would like the emergence of countless so-called thinkers. Some things can be done, but some things can't be done. If hell only promoted practical living skills, the higher-ups would be happy to turn a blind eye to it. But if hell became a hotbed for new ideas, it didn't take a genius to figure out what the higher-ups' attitude would be. Taking this extra step would be stepping into the abyss. This swordsman wasn't a swordsman at all. He was more of a law cultivator than a law cultivator. He was a combination of law cultivator and senior bureaucrat. His grasp of the human heart was terrifying. Unfortunately, what they learn here won't be brought to the mortal realm. Lu Xiaoyi chuckled. That's right. That's not it either. Practical things might not be able to be brought over, but there are many people in this world who are born with knowledge. For example, those who are born with a strong ability to learn in a certain field of work are able to grasp it in a moment's time. They can even draw inferences about other things. The people we're nurturing here can be called talent. They're born with the ability to farm, forge, craft, and make babies. Chapter 2398. The transformation of hell was in full swing. Lu Xiaoyi was the brain, Taoistsen was the one in charge, and the remaining 200 ghost soldiers worked together under King Qingguang's leadership. The first thing was to topple the 18 mountains that were weighing down on them. The 18 levels of hell were completely demolished. This caused a huge commotion in hell. It was also because of this that countless souls were motivated to participate in the work. While Taoistsen was working himself to death outside, Lu Xiaoyi sat on a chair at the top of Qingguang Hall, watching the wind and clouds. King Qingguang waited on him from the side, and there was a large bucket under his feet. The bucket was filled with spicy soup, which he had gotten from the Bridge of Helplessness. Lu Xiaoyi finally found a biscuit, which he had learned from Taoistsen. He took a sip of soup and a bite of biscuit, but he was still not satisfied. The taste is slightly worse than Granny Meng's. Pepper is the soul, star anise, fennel, cinnamon, ginger, grass fruit, white buckle, amomum, cloves, actually, mutton giblet soup is the most delicious, but unfortunately, there are no sheep here when hell begins to accept the reincarnation of livestock in the future, and it doesn't seem appropriate?" King Qingguang broke out in cold sweat as he listened. The person in front of him might be a saint, but he believed that he was a vicious demon. He held a bowl with one hand and ladled soup with the other, respectfully filling the bowl for the vicious demon, but his mind was thinking about other things. "Emissary, I've seen the new rules of hell, and there are some problems that are stuck in my throat. This humble king's knowledge is limited, but I've worked hard in hell for hundreds of thousands of years, and I have some opinions, but I wonder if it's appropriate to say them?" Lu Xiaoyi encouraged, "Speak. We won't be coming to hell much in the future, so we'll have to rely on you guys. If you don't understand, then as time passes, everything will change. So, if you have any questions, ask. These things are not secret." King Qingguang deliberated. "I understand Lord Emissary's intentions, but will this really be useful? If it's useless, won't it incur the wrath of the immortal court?" Lu Xiaoyi smiled. "Whether it's useful or not, we'll know after we do it. In any case, I know that what you guys have done for hundreds of thousands of years is useless. Other than creating psychological trauma, there was no good result. You see, you've done such a terrible thing. Even the immortal court has tolerated you for hundreds of thousands of years. How much worse can my change be? There's no need to worry so much. This was an era of change. The immortal court, the world of cultivation, and the underworld, none of them could escape. What you're worried about is nothing more than the change being too big and completely deviating from the original direction." "But the problem is your original direction correct? Hell's system is nothing more than the wishful thinking of you mortals. Let's make use of this opportunity to make a complete change. Tinkering won't work. It's a waste of time and emotions." King Qingguang nodded. "The rest of us are not willing to reincarnate, but we are willing to do our best for you. But I still have to ask, do they have room for improvement?" Lu Xiaoyi knew that they were going to ask about this. It was human nature. It would be fake if he didn't ask. "There are also vacancies for the Yama Kings of the 9 palaces. I can confidently tell you that most of the vacancies will be filled by emissaries of hell like you. After all, in tens of thousands of years of experience, you have already proven your character. If I go to those living souls to look for people, wouldn't I be giving up what's close at hand and seeking what's far away? If a few cold-hearted and cruel people appear, I'll still have to wipe your ass. Am I that stupid?" King Qingguang's heart calmed down. This was actually the biggest thought of the remaining ghost messengers. No one was willing to let those living souls ride on top of their heads and order them around. They had at least tens of thousands of years of experience and their own strength. Their conscience was their conscience, and their face was their face. They could not be confused. Lu Xiaoyi pointed at him. "But to get the position of Yama King, it depends on their understanding of the new policies and their ability to do things. There shouldn't be a problem, right?" King Qingguang smiled. "This is how it should be. No one can say anything else. The capable go up, and the mediocre retreat. This is the law of the heavenly Tao." Lu Xiaoyi nodded. "In the current situation, we can only guide everyone's actions in terms of the internal duties of hell. When the day comes that the new hell's rules are approved by the heavenly Tao, and the heavenly Tao will use it as a model to promote it throughout the universe, I'll fight for even greater benefits for you." King Qingguang's heart itched. He wanted to ask, but he was too embarrassed. He felt that he wasn't shrewd enough. Seeing him so uncomfortable, Lu Xiaoyi laughed inwardly. "If you want to use a donkey, how can you not use a carrot? You have to give people something to strive for. After all, no one exists for the sake of contribution. I'll say a few words first. Be careful not to spread it. Even with your current status as a hall master, there is still a lot of space for you to go up. For example, if you're willing to reincarnate, can you consider providing some convenience in your cultivation? Another example is to include the positions of the officials of Hell in the order of the Immortal Court. You will have the right to go to the Immortal Court for meetings. My motto is that as long as you do well, there will definitely be a way to go up. This is also the characteristic of the new era. Of course, in the future, if you can rely on Hell to climb to the golden immortal realm, I won't be able to lift you up. King Qingguang's face was full of wrinkles. I don't dare to think about it. I don't dare to think about it. With Lord's support, Qingguang will never dare to forget. I will definitely do my best and do my best. Be listed as an immortal. You really don't dare to think about it? Lu Xiaoyi said earnestly. My principle is that everyone has a way to survive. Once you find a path, don't be half-hearted. At the very least, before you prove that this path is completely impossible, you have to work together, right? I have a bad temper, and it's an old problem. Therefore, I kill those who don't work together, but this can't hide the fact that there are more people who should work together with me. We can slowly do and observe the matters of Hell. There are at least thousands of years before the arrival of the new era, enough time for the souls of mortals to reincarnate dozens of times. In other words, the heavenly Tao will be able to see the success of our reform before the new era. It will also decide my future. Of course, it will also decide your future. Even an old soul like King Qingguang, who had lived for hundreds of thousands of years, was bewitched by this pie in the sky. The pie in the sky was bewitching soup. Whoever ate it would know. This Lord really made people unable to stop themselves. Everyone has selfishness, and so do souls. This is spiritual wisdom. Selfishness isn't a bad thing. It is also a driving force for the progress of the universe. The reason why King Qingguang wasn't willing to reincarnate was because of his dream of immortality. He was very clear that even if he could reincarnate and cultivate, it was basically impossible for him to cultivate to the level of immortals for eternity. The probability was that he would only live a few hundred or thousand years longer than ordinary mortals. Therefore, starting from Hell was the safest. He had waited for hundreds of thousands of years, and finally, such an opportunity had come. Chapter 2399. Since he had already decided to devote himself wholeheartedly, King Qingguang's performance was much more natural. My lord, since the goal has been set, we will naturally work together. However, from what I've seen in the reform of the underworld, it seems that there are very few rules. Will these living souls be too unrestrained and difficult to manage? Lu Xiaoyi explained to him, this is the underworld, not the mortal realm. Therefore, it's not appropriate to apply the system of the mortal realm here. For example, your previous system, other than creating fear, what effect does it have? King Qingguang was deep in thought. He was a grassroots bureaucrat in his previous life, so he had a deep understanding of this. Lu Xiaoyi pointed out, in the underworld, you don't have to care about the living soul's basic necessities. There are no differences between families or regions. You don't have to worry about natural and man-made disasters. There is no drought, flood, water, or fire. It can be said that most of the functions of the Yamen in the mortal realm don't exist here. Then, why do we still have to set up so many rules? In principle, the simpler the better. If it's complicated, it'll be difficult for people to understand. It will slowly deteriorate and give birth to some strange things that you can't imagine. Therefore, our principle is, when entering the underworld, everyone will be treated equally. When exiting the underworld, everyone will rely on their own luck. There will be no prior arrangements. Lu Xiaoyi pondered for a moment. Making arrangements in advance is a breeding ground for corruption and personal gain. Because you can decide the starting point of others' futures, there are bound to be people who would take advantage of this opportunity to profit from it, and even break the rules of Hell. There's another point. Arranging for reincarnation in the future also consumes most of your time and energy. It's the biggest mistake to put it in such an unfair direction. In the future, don't focus on entering and exiting the underworld, but on the process in the underworld. Study clubs, skill clubs, major factories, amusement parks, all of these actually have only one purpose: to subtly influence the living soul's spirits. The memories of the previous life can't be taken away, nor can the learning of the underworld. The only thing that can be taken away is the spirits. To heal the spirits of these living souls that were once injured, to make them more peaceful, more stable, and more ambitious. When these living souls reincarnate as humans again, this latent influence will slowly exert its power throughout their lives. Change can't be seen, it's slow, and it needs time to prove itself. But if we compare these people's lives after reincarnation with the way of hell, we'll realize the meaning of our actions. Of course, there would definitely be some who were evil. But if one were to look at the ratio, then hell would become the most important force for the harmonious evolution of all living beings in the universe. During the interval between life forms, this place could be used as a relay station for healing, allowing more and more beauty to appear in the world of the living. This way, the universe would also have less negative energy. This was the purpose of hell's existence. If one day, hell becomes an indispensable node in the cycle of reincarnation for all living beings in the universe, then that will be the opportunity for you, King Yenluo of Hell, to attain enlightenment. Can you understand what I'm saying? King Qingguang knelt down on one knee, his eyes firm. I will die without regrets. This really wasn't a scam. It was an ideal. It was the target. This was truly a great merit. Not the bullshit words of a certain Buddha, such hypocritical words as I swear that I won't become a Buddha until hell is empty. What's the point of saying all this bullshit if you're not doing anything? Lu Xiaoyi spat and fiercely gulped down a mouthful of spicy soup. Everything in hell would slowly unfold under his control. If everything went smoothly, he could be sure of one thing. His new reincarnation was in the bag. Daoistsen ran over. He was rather resentful because he realized that no matter who partnered with this swordsman, the end result was that they had to work hard with their buttocks stuck out. This fellow was nonchalant at the side, acting as if it was a matter of course, but they couldn't say anything about it. Some of the souls below are wavering. I don't know where the rumors came from, but they say that although the 18 levels of hell have been overthrown, the amusement park being built now is a place even more terrifying than the previous 18 levels of hell. Therefore, some of them are working without putting in any effort. There hasn't been a strike yet, but I feel that it won't be long before there will be a strike. We can't use force, but to explain such rumors, it's futile. King Qingguang stood up. With the King Yenluo's seal binding them, they won't dare to disobey. I'll gather the hell's soldiers again, and see who's the daring one who's deliberately causing trouble here. Lu Xiaoyi waved his hand. What's the point? The new hell should have a new atmosphere and a new way of doing things. We can't do the same thing as before. Things like rumors come from the direction in their hearts. How can we find out the source? The reason why such rumors can spread is because every soul still has the fear of the past in their hearts. It's human nature. After all, our reform has only just begun. He placed one hand on his waist and waved it. Go and do it. Stop work on the 17 levels of the amusement park. Only the level with the fastest construction will be left. When it's finished, I'll go and cut the ribbon. After that, I'll play with everyone and have fun with the people. The two received their orders and left. After taking 2 steps, Daoistsen turned back. You rascal, you're getting more and more like a leader? When I saw you just now, I thought you were some golden immortal giving a lecture. Lu Xiaoyi's face sank. Hurry up and go. Don't be so chatty. This daddy's hell doesn't keep idle people. Daoistsen turned around. He couldn't understand how a former immortal, an existence that cultivators of the origin world would revere and even be at a loss of what to do, could be reduced to doing odd jobs in front of this guy. Several days later, the roller coaster slide on the 11th level, which gathered all the souls of Hell's living souls, was completed. This was a giant monster that was much larger than the one in his memories. Taoistsen couldn't be blamed. Although his drawings were detailed enough, he forgot to mark out the dimensions. He had that memory, but Taoistsen didn't. Thus he built this giant monster. The advantage of building this thing in Hell was that there was no need to worry about anyone having a heart attack. There was also no need to worry about safety, because the passengers wouldn't fall to their deaths. On the day of its completion, all the living souls of Hell flocked over. They wanted to see how this giant transformation was going to torture them. There were thousands of layers inside and thousands of layers outside, densely packed. Then, they saw the most powerful figure in Hell, the High Emissary with 9 official seals, board the roller coaster. There were also hundreds of solemn and old-fashioned ghost envoys. There were also hundreds of living souls who had been invited to give it a try. They didn't dare to not go, because this was an order from the High Emissary. Before the roller coaster started, Lu Xiaoyi asked, "What's the matter? Oldson, have you tried running this thing?" Taoistsen was speechless. "When did I have the time? This is the first time I've been urged by you. So don't ask me what accidents might happen." The roller coaster started, gradually accelerating until it went crazy. Countless excited screams rang out amidst the dazzling rolling and spinning. This was the release of emotions, the true feeling of flying. The surrounding living souls watched as this strange flying car spiraled up and down in the sky. There seemed to be traces of liquid sprinkling down. The taste of spicy pepper soup. Chapter 2400. As more and more brave and curious souls tried the roller coaster, they finally understood what it was. Thus, the rumors were dispelled. The rest of the project also started smoothly. The living souls were especially hard-working, because they urgently wanted to know what kind of strange things the other 17 levels had installed. If it wasn't a punishment, then it was a toy. At the same time as the construction, it was the selection of souls with skills and knowledge. Among so many souls, there was no lack of such people. After being promised a higher status and treatment, the souls eagerly signed up. The number far exceeded their imagination. Only souls who are excellent in learning and skills have the qualifications to enter the amusement park to play. We also have to control the levels. To be able to play all 18 levels of the amusement park is a huge honor. When did such a trend occur? You came to the underworld, but you didn't play all 18 levels of the game. You died for nothing. Hurry up and die again. When such a trend prevails, it means that your efforts are beginning to bear fruit. The transformation of the underworld has taken the first successful step. King Qinguang and the group of ghost envoys were enlightened. They weren't stupid and had already seen a trend from the recent changes in the souls. It was a change that made people tremble with fear and filled with hope, and they were the participants, creators, maintainers and guardians. Although it was tough, they would benefit from it. There was no upper limit to the benefits. How could it not make people excited? The 18th level of the amusement park isn't everything. It only represents a way of living. There are many, many ways of living, waiting for you to discover them yourselves. Don't be afraid of making mistakes. If you make a mistake, you can change it. Even deities will make mistakes. Even the heavenly Tao has omissions, let alone you? Recall your past life and your experiences in the underworld. Actually, you can find many factors that make people happy and comfortable. I'm only giving the order of the underworld a start. In the future, there is still endless space for imagination. The more your heart is, the more beautiful the underworld will be. As long as you grasp the principles, be fair, just, open, talk less and do more practical things, I believe that the underworld will become better and better. The ghost envoys were now full of enthusiasm. This was completely different from their previous absent-mindedness and muddling through. Because they had a goal. No matter if it was a person or a soul, only hope could make them truly live. Otherwise, they would only be walking corpses that lived for the sake of living. Daoist Sun was also very enthusiastic, because he'd originally been thinking about how to get a bigger slice of the cake, but the swordsman's method was to make the cake incomparably big, so big that just one bite was enough to fill his stomach. Although it seemed that more and more people were sharing the cake now, he no longer cared about how much he could get. Because no matter how much he got, it would be a surprise. He had to admit that the swordsman's approach was more brilliant, grander, and more strategic. Do we need to establish a monitoring mechanism? Or should we build a system that allows people to go up and down? I'm afraid that some of them will have other thoughts after doing it for a long time. This was his original plan. It was the kind of plan that he would sow and mend. However, he was afraid that if he said it now, it would ruin the situation that he had worked so hard to achieve. Lu Xiaoyi shook his head. Your method of applying ointment is not suitable for now. Not only would it not be of any help, it would instead cause panic and fear among the people. The clearest period of a dynasty is the period of its establishment. At that time, everyone has their own ideals and responsibilities, and they will rise to the top. What we need to do is encourage them, not supervise them and drag them down. Next is the period of its heyday. While it is glorious, it will also cause all kinds of problems. Finally, at the end of the dynasty, it will be beyond cure and incurable. Your method is suitable for the later period of its heyday. It will probably delay the aging of the dynasty, but it won't solve the root of the problem. I won't deny that the 2,000 years before the arrival of the new era is the period of its growth. It will be like the rising sun. What we need is this period of success. It will be able to lay a good foundation for you and me. As for the future, let's take it one step at a time. There will be too many changes in the new era. Who knows what kind of evil things will appear? Daoist Sun was a little absent-minded. He realized that the swordsman was sometimes a saint, but at other times, he was also a shrewd businessman. It was scary how realistic he was. He could even haggle over every little thing that could benefit the entire human race in the universe. Lu Xiaoyi glanced at him. All the great changes in the history of human development in the universe are actually a profitable business at the end of the day. It may sound unscrupulous, but don't forget that the only thing that can sustain the creativity of the human race is profit and nothing else. Therefore, a simple saint won't live for long, nor will he be able to do anything for long. You want eternity? Then you'll have to find a common interest. Daoist Sun fell into deep thought. Lu Xiaoyi teased him. Old man Sun, I see that you have the potential to become a saint. Why don't you make a great wish as well? Swear not to become an immortal until hell is empty? Daoist Sun's eyebrows shot up. Are you stupid? Do you think I'm like those Buddhists who talk big? Busyness was the main theme of hell right now. There were hundreds of things waiting to be done. And yet, he was able to draw the most beautiful picture on such a blank piece of paper. Lu Xiaoyi was still as frivolous as ever. He was used to being a hands-off boss, and he spent his days drinking spicy soup. His only hobby was to figure out how to make more authentic spicy soup. Daoist Sun's work also began to shift from concrete tasks to human affairs. The crux of how far hell's reforms could go, how deep they could go, and how far they could persevere depended on the emissaries of hell. It was wishful thinking to rely on the living souls to form beliefs and influence hell's progress. Hell was made of iron, and the living souls flowed like water. The key to forming a culture lay with the emissaries of hell. Reading people's hearts was his forte. Thus, as hell's construction was in full swing, the 10 palaces of King Yanluo began to be rebuilt. New palaces of King Yanluo were appointed one after another, and all of them were the most loyal followers and the most capable executors. In truth, they couldn't escape the scope of the old emissaries of hell. This process continued for 50 years. The 18-floored amusement park had long been completed, and the framework of the palaces of King Yenluo had been re-established. All aspects were on the right track on this day. The two of them stood above the sinkhole and looked at the 18 levels of hell that had undergone a complete makeover. They were filled with emotion. "I can't believe we've actually done it. I can feel some kind of acknowledgement. It's praise from the Qingwei heavens. It seems like we've succeeded?" Taoist Sin was satisfied. "Perhaps. The bigwigs above will naturally acknowledge us, because we've helped them clean up their asses. If hell isn't dealt with properly, it's possible that moles will form." Taoist Sin sensed something and looked up. "Another great Tao can't hold on." Lu Xiaoyi sighed. "The heavens want to collapse, and the mother wants to get married. So be it. This matter has come to an end." Chapter 2401. Two figures stood silently in the sky outside Jinxiuland. The magnificent figure of Jinxiuland was beneath their feet. It was light green and surrounded by white lines. It was huge and had a stable structure. The surrounding weather was just right, creating the most favorable environment for human survival. "I remember that there was a true immortal overseeing this place the last time I came here," Taoist Sin explained. "It's just an immortal. That true immortal has already fallen. There are no immortals guarding Jinxiuland now. Therefore, you can still go in, but no one will take you out. Don't look at me. I'm just a small half-immortal like you. I want to save you, but I'm powerless." Taoist Sin stopped Lu Xiaoyi's delusional wish to go in. This was both the truth and a kind of advice. Of course, he knew what this swordsman wanted to do. It was nothing more than a few swordsman friends of the Western Zhao. But this was actually unnecessary. Before the new era, they were bound by their oath and couldn't come out. After the new era, the passage would most likely disappear. Naturally, their oath would be removed with the change of era. It would be very convenient for them to come out. The only thing stopping them was their revival before the new era. After the trip to the underworld, Taoist Sin finally thought of him from the swordsman's perspective. He was very experienced in this aspect. The two actually understood each other's intentions. There was no need to explain anything. They just waited silently. They were waiting for the great Tao to shatter. "It seems like there's more than one?" Taoist Sin guessed. "There won't be many," Lu Xiaoyi judged. The two waited for an unknown amount of time. Suddenly, they looked up at the same time. The universe suddenly fell silent. Bang bang. Two sounds. Thunder, silence. One Tao, one Buddha. It's probably these few. The later it gets easier to guess, and the easier it is to guess, the more meaningless it is. Taoists sighed. 22 great Taos had already collapsed. Was he ready to take the second step? Lu Xiaoyi didn't know either. His problem was that he had expanded his business too much. It was so big that he couldn't handle it all. "Old Sin, why didn't you set up a Tao tablet in the land of the Yellow Dragon? I see that you're looking for merit all over the universe, but you're not doing anything." Taoists laughed bitterly. "Because I'm not as ambitious as you freaks. There's a fact that I'm not sure if you know about. That was, when it came to the choice of Tao, the half-immortals of the lower realms were more inclined to fight for the innate great Tao, and the immortals of the immortal court favored the post-celestial great Tao after they fell and descended to the mortal world?" Lu Xiaoyi sneered. "Old Sin, are you saying that we are overestimating ourselves? But it could also be that you have lost the courage to fight for it under the pressure of Qingwei heaven?" Taoists smiled wryly. "Perhaps, but you have to know that when an immortal falls and descends to the mortal world to start over, there's an additional process involved compared to you half-immortals from the lower realm. This was the process of possessing a lower realm cultivator. In this regard, gold immortals are far superior to true immortals, and true immortals are far superior to transcendent immortals." Lu Xiaoyi understood. "You're saying that golden immortals might descend from the great Tao? And true immortals and human immortals can't do that? Taoists nodded. The best attachment in the cultivation world is the attachment of the great Tao. When a great Tao fragment descends, it's the most natural trap. With the ability of a golden immortal connate Tao master, they can leave behind their own dormant Tao intent on every great Tao fragment. Then, countless lower realm cultivators will fight for it, as if they're fighting for a chance to be possessed. Do these lower realm cultivators who finally succeed really not know what they've snatched? Not necessarily. But even though they know this, they still enjoy it. This is because every cultivator privately agrees with this method of coexisting with the golden immortal great Tao. They don't think that they've been possessed, but instead think that they've fused with the great Tao. Who can refuse such a brilliant method? Lu Xiaoyi fell silent. Possession was a very profound category. It wasn't limited to the simple and crude method of low-level cultivators. They would enter your mind and sea of consciousness, disperse your main body's consciousness, and then take over your nest. The more brilliant method was to use the great Tao to conquer you, make you acknowledge, understand, and willingly fuse with it. When you acknowledge such a great Tao intent, you've already been possessed by a golden immortal in a different way. He actually knew this concept long ago, but he didn't dare to think too deeply about it, because once he thought about it, he wouldn't be able to cultivate. If your friends want a great Tao fragment, will you give it to them? Will you help them? Could it be that the only way to help them was to reject them? Taoists really treated him as a friend now, which was why he was discussing this problem with him. You can also change your way of thinking and look at this problem from another angle. For example, you entered the Xianyuan sword sect when you were in the Foundation establishment realm, and eventually fell in love with the sword vein, and made it your lifelong goal. Then, does it count as being possessed by the sword Tao? Does it count as being possessed by Li Wuyao, the great emperor of Xianyuan? You'll definitely say no. Because what you agree with is some of their basic ideas, and not the complete person, including their personality, hobbies, temper, family, and so on. You might even be able to innovate on your own path of swordsmanship. You might even be able to walk on a path that is completely different from theirs. But you'll respect and be grateful to them in your heart, and you'll be willing to help their legacy to the best of your ability, and even make it your primary cultivation goal. In this way, you'll almost meet all the conditions for being possessed by the sword Tao. Ask yourself honestly, have you been possessed? Lu Xiaoyi had really never thought about the great Tao in this way. He was also a little confused. I seem to be a little confused. Maybe I haven't been possessed, or maybe I've been possessed long ago. This is a muddled account. How can I calculate it clearly? But, is it necessary to calculate it so clearly? Taoists clapped his hands and laughed. See, in the end, you're too lazy to calculate it clearly. Because you can't calculate it clearly at all. No one can calculate it clearly. This is the power of the great Tao possession. It's not a cultivation problem. It's not a technical problem. It's a problem of ethics. Those golden immortals did this. So, if I say they'll definitely succeed, they'll definitely have thousands of incarnations. One of them will definitely follow their Tao, and it might be Zhang, San, Li Si, and Wang Ermatzi. If that's the case, what chance do we true immortals and human immortals have? Unless we create a brand new connate great Tao. By the same logic, are you still worried that those friends around you will be taken in by this golden immortal? Possessed by that golden immortal? Lu Xiaoyi was convinced. No one would be able to refuse such a possession. Because strictly speaking, it wasn't a possession, but a fusion of ideas. Could you refuse the correct idea of the great Tao? Would he do everything in the opposite direction because he was afraid of being taken over? He somewhat understood Taoists' meaning. Chapter 2402. Taoists finally came to a conclusion. So, on the surface, many newcomers may combine the 36 innate great Taoists in the new era, but in essence, those golden immortals will rise to the top again. There's no contradiction. But we true immortals and human immortals have no way out. We can't rise to the lower realm cultivators chosen by golden immortals. We can only obediently combine the great Taoists we are most familiar with. Maybe human immortals can become true immortals, but true immortals can't become human immortals. But no matter how we change, we can't become golden immortals. Now, do you still think it's because you monsters are more aggressive, that we old immortals are declining and conservative? Lu Xiaoyi shook his head and sighed. What Taoists said was generally correct, but it wasn't completely hopeless. For example, after an immortal died, he could find a half-immortal who didn't have a great Tao fragment to ambush him, and then influence him to attack one of the 36 innate great Tao. But this situation only existed in theory, and it wasn't practical. It was hard to imagine that a half-immortal who pursued an innate great Tao couldn't even get a fragment of a great Tao. At the same time, a strange thought emerged in his mind. The heart plate incident in the past was very disturbing, but from the perspective of great Tao possession, could it also be understood as the golden immortal's secret self-promotion? These secrets of cultivation would never be answered, because in the eyes of lower realm cultivators, possession was just preaching to golden immortals? Preaching to Tao was the most brilliant possession. It sounded like a fantasy. According to your theory, every master, every guide is a possessor. It's a bit unreasonable, but if it only affects the mind and doesn't occupy the body, it doesn't seem unreasonable? Taoists said with a smile, possession is a derogatory term in the cultivation system, but it refers to the violent possession of the body by mid-level and low-level cultivators. In the process of obtaining the body there is a karma of killing. Therefore, preconceived notions like yours are formed, and they believe that any form of possession is inhumane and unforgivable. But in the immortal court, possession isn't an act that angers both humans and gods, but a method that immortals use to carry on the spirit of their orthodoxy. There was only one prerequisite, and that was to not harm the stolen cultivator's true self. Instead, one had to find a method that one was best at among the many factors of cultivation to invade and fuse with. You are still you, but some of your basic concepts are changing subtly, and you are beginning to converge with that immortal's consciousness. We call this situation a success in possession. Lu Xiaoyi sighed. Very profound. So far, I can't find a reason to refute it. Taoists sneered. Do you really think an immortal's million-year lifespan was fed to a dog? Of course, he had to find a balance between himself and the heavenly Tao. In the cultivation world of the lower realms, there are rare geniuses who have shown extraordinary potential in cultivation. I don't dare to say that every genius has fallen into the Tao, but a large number of them are actually the escape routes that the immortals of the immortal court left for themselves when they perished. Such a situation did not occur when the era was about to change. Instead, it had happened a long time ago. However, before the new era, a large number of immortals had perished, and the truth had slowly surfaced. So, it's not strange at all. Lu Xiaoyi pondered, but ordinary immortals acquired great Taoists have too many limitations, and their target audience is far smaller than that of innate great Taoists. Good seedlings are hard to find, and their quality is low as well. Is this the difference between human immortals, true immortals, and golden immortals? Taoists nodded. Exactly. Although ordinary immortals and true immortals also want to rely on their acquired great Taoists to pass down their legacies forever, their target audience is too small, and their opportunities are too few. Therefore, other strange methods of immortality have appeared. One of the more brilliant ones is that immortals can influence the construction of your future superego, and when you attain the Tao, you become him. But no matter what method it is, there is a basic premise for the so-called possession of an immortal. it must not affect the mind of the person being possessed, so that the possessed person can still have an independent personality. This is the condition to continue to reach the immortal realm after possession. Otherwise, the heavenly Tao will not tolerate you, because the heavenly Tao does not allow anyone to become an immortal twice. Which immortal would plant a seed in the lower realm in order to live for a few thousand more years. They do it for immortality. Therefore, when it comes to possession, you have to have a correct view of it. Don't be alarmed and turn pale at the mention of it. You can dislike it, but you can't discredit it. Discrediting it means that you are challenging the master system of the cultivation world. In theory, every master is actually a possessor of the great Tao. Each of the jade slips was a book of possession. If you learn from him, will you be possessed? Lu Xiaoyi thought for a moment. I admit that what you said makes a lot of sense. But why do I feel that you are purely standing from the perspective of an immortal and trying to whitewash them? Old Sin, you are already a half-immortal now. Taoist Sin snorted. I'm trying to whitewash them? It's precisely because I don't approve of this method that I degraded myself in the lower realm. Otherwise, I would have chosen a more reliable method of falling and planting my seed. Lu Xiaoyi laughed loudly. Old Sin, believe me. Actually, the choice you are making now is the right path, at least from a man's point of view. You can pick up your spear and go into battle. You don't have to watch others do it and worry yourself helplessly. He was very clear about Taoist Sin's purpose in telling him these words. He was warning him not to treat these so-called immortals and cultivators as his irreconcilable enemies. Everyone was working hard for the new era, but their methods were different. The cultivation world was a colorful world with many paths. Under the approval of the heavenly Tao, you couldn't just assume that your path was the right one and everyone else's was the wrong one. It was very easy to make enemies, and there were too many powerful enemies. Taoist Sin was right. He shouldn't become the target of public criticism. The splendid earth was so beautiful beneath their feet. Discussing the Tao in this kind of setting was also a kind of pleasure. A beam of light flashed across the sky. Both of them were surprised. Speaking of fragments, the fragments had arrived. When did they have such good luck? But soon, the two of them calmed down. That wasn't a fragment, but a sneaky puppet creature. Ghostly head and ghostly head wasn't used to describe a creature's temperament. Instead, it was a ghostly object created by a human. It was extremely exquisite and didn't reveal the slightest bit of its internal aura. It traveled through the void in an ordinary manner. It was extremely unusual. Taoist Sin sighed. Fairy Hengji of the Immortal Court's nether floating palace loves to make ghost dolls. If you have the chance to visit her, you will know that her nether floating palace is the most terrifying place in Great Scarlet Sky. There are countless ghost dolls. If she admires a junior, she will usually give you one. Chapter 2403. Neither of them moved. This was an order from an immortal, so they couldn't and didn't need to hide. This was a puppet doll with a red dress, green pants, white shoes, and a small white flower on her head. Her baby fat face was dotted with freckles. With such a tacky outfit, it was very strange for her to appear in the void. Her taste is really bad. Old man Sin, is there something wrong with your lover? Lu Xiaoyi couldn't help but complain when he saw the doll bouncing closer. Taoist Sin felt the same, but he still reminded him, don't talk nonsense. She's not my lover, so she can't afford to. After going to her nether floating palace, all she has is a puppet doll, so she won't have any thoughts. I just had a small conflict with her in the Immortal Court, so she took the opportunity to teach me a lesson in the underworld. She didn't have any killing intent. Fairy Hengji cultivates the soul-leaving Tao, which is a branch of the Tao of reincarnation. That's why she went to the underworld last time. I feel that her target is you. Don't drag me into this. That woman is like a ghost that won't go away. You can't afford to offend her. Ghost Child floated in front of them. Sure enough, it didn't even look at Dao Cien. Its gaze was fixed on Lu Xiaoyi. Then, it grinned, revealing two abnormal canine teeth. Your escort Lu, right? I'm Ing 17. Grandma asked me to wait for you here, but I've waited for 50 years. It's so lonely in the void. I don't even have a companion. How are you going to make it up to me? Lu Xiaoyi laughed dryly. Okay. It's my fault for making you wait outside for 50 years. I should make it up to you. I just don't know what you like. Since it's compensation, I should cater to your liking, right? Ing 17 showed his canine teeth. I'm just hungry. Escort, do you have anything delicious to eat? With a wave of his hand, Lu Xiaoyi threw out a series of treasures, many of which were immortal items that belonged to Goat Lion. Daoistsen, who was watching from the side, was struck dumb by the sight of Dafa. In the cultivation world, things like puppets usually fed on spiritual treasures, not roasted meat, fruits, and pastries. They were spiritual beings, so they didn't have the appetite of a wild boar. Seeing the treasures flying over, Ing 17 was very satisfied. At first, he thought that they were just ordinary treasures from the mortal world, so he would not be able to eat them to his heart's content. There were too many impurities, and it would be a waste of his teeth. Who would have thought that Escort Lu would be so generous and throw out several fairy artifacts at once? Even in the immortal court's great scarlet heaven, it had been a very long time since she had eaten so heartily. There were simply too many sisters in the palace. How could she split them all? She held one fairy artifact and began to gnaw on it. Although her mouth was not big, her teeth were very sharp. Her teeth were like saw-teeth, and in the blink of an eye, she had devoured two fairy artifacts. Even under the cover of her red dress, her small belly was slightly bulging. She hadn't finished eating yet. There were still two treasures left, but she was obviously full. However, she was a little unwilling to give up. Her big eyes rolled over the remaining two treasures. How could Lu Xiaoyi not know what she was thinking? Put away the rest. You can eat them on the road later. Ghost Child smiled and hung the two remaining treasures on his waist. We have to eat them on the road. They will be robbed when we go back. Escort Lu, I've been waiting for you here under Granny's order. I want to talk to you. Later, Granny's consciousness will come to me. You have to answer her properly. Otherwise, you will be in trouble. Granny doesn't like frivolous and slippery people. Call me Granny, not Fairy. You have to be careful with your words. Also, Wu Gon, please leave. Lu Xiaoyi smiled and thanked him. Taoistsen was relieved. He gave Lu Xiaoyi a look that said, "Good luck." Taoistsen left without hesitation. He knew that swordsman would not be in danger, but he might be in trouble. As for how difficult it was to deal with Fairy Hingji, he had already experienced it. When he was an immortal, he did not care, but now he could not. Ing 17 closed his eyes in front of him, but he didn't tremble like he had expected. After all, immortals were different from scammers. Slowly, Ghost Child Baby 17 opened his eyes. His eyes were a little dull. Although his voice was still that of a child, his tone had changed greatly. Lu Xiaoyi, you stole my position. Do you know your crime? Lu Xiaoyi bowed slightly. Granny, you were joking. I was just acting according to the situation. Please forgive me if I have offended you. Baby 17 spoke like an old man. Forget it. I was developing the path of reincarnation in the underworld, but I did not expect to run into you. This is fate. I have watched your reincarnation for many years, and I have some doubts. Would you be willing to answer my doubts? Lu Xiaoyi was very modest. Why would you say that, Granny? There are no secrets in the path of the great Tao. It is impossible to cultivate by hiding. Little E told him everything he knew without holding back. However, the path of the underworld was built by me and Taoistsen together, so there may be some. Hengji interrupted him. It has something to do with Tsen? I have watched him for millions of years. How can he become so strong after a few years in the lower realm? By mentioning him, are you trying to find an excuse for your own lies? Lu Xiaoyi smiled bitterly. Most of it is my idea, but there are many details that Taoists perfected. That is the truth. Heng Ji did not pursue the matter any further. Let me ask you. The underworld that you lead now has no function of punishing the previous life. Is there any meaning in such a reincarnation to punish evil and promote good? Since they were talking about the great Tao, Lu Xiaoyi would not be modest. The existence of the underworld is a prison or a place of enlightenment. There is no conclusion. The 18 levels of hell are the wishes of the common people. They could not do it when they were alive, so they began to hope that there would be such a place to fulfill their wishes. It is a kind of self-deception. Just like how Buddhists bewitch mortals to do good deeds and ascend to nirvana, the function of the underworld is to fulfill the wishes of mortals to do evil and go to the 18 levels of hell. Therefore, I think that the 18 levels of hell are Buddhists' poison. In a sense, it is the same as nirvana. It is a scene to bewitch people. Mortals are foolish and do not know the secrets of heaven. We cultivators also think the same. Isn't it a bit of a parrot? Heng Ji was startled. Your way of thinking is quite novel. However, nirvana is indeed the same as the 18 levels of hell. They are both places that do not exist. They are scenes created by wishes, but they do not originally exist. However, punishing evil and promoting good is not bad in itself, right? Lu Xiaoyi spoke eloquently. Punishing evil and promoting good actually has another sentence behind it. It is to cure the sick and save the person. Cultivators should set their sights higher. Punishing evil and promoting good is just a method. Isn't the goal to cure the sick and save the person? Punishing evil for the sake of punishing evil is not the true philosophy. It is only pursuing the surface but not the root. This is the crux of the underworld's current situation. Chapter 2404. Heng Ji asked, then, can the evil deeds be easily brushed aside and not pursued anymore? Lu Xiaoyi asked back, since there are such reincarnation rules, then should there still be living people in this world? Everyone should go to the netherworld to suffer, including you and me. Because all of us have sinned, it's just a matter of how much and which lifetime. Therefore, I think that things like measuring evil should be ended in the present. When people die, the light goes out and we should not pursue it anymore. Because you don't have a standard that everyone agrees with, how many lifetimes will you pursue it? How will the punishment be decided? As long as there are people involved, it's destined to be unfair. Why don't we break it off for a lifetime? At least, we can pin our hopes on the future. Heng Ji disagreed. Break it off for a lifetime? In this way, many evil people will escape punishment. They are tyrannical in the world of the living, but they will be lightly brushed aside in the netherworld. Lu Xiaoyi asked, you are not satisfied that evil people escape punishment, but you never care if good people don't get rewarded? Is this fair? It's time to turn the page. Don't be obsessed with punishment. What you did in hell will only make their already dark natures even more twisted. Other than that, it can't achieve any other effect. Either you invite a golden immortal, or don't let the evil people reincarnate. See if the world will become better? Heng Ji replied, impossible. According to the heavenly Tao rules, everyone has the right to reincarnate, and if you do that, humans will become extinct. Lu Xiaoyi was speechless. I see, then why do you insist on doing that? We all believe that everyone has the right to reincarnate, so why don't you believe that they have the possibility of turning over a new leaf? Punishing evil and promoting good is the karma of mortals. It's not for cultivators. Cultivators pay attention to the karma of the present world and end it in the present world. Why is it that in the netherworld, a place created by cultivators, our thoughts are being hijacked by mortals? Just because mortals believe that the gods will avenge them, they come up with such a nondescript thing? Do we not know our own surnames when we hold cultivators up so high? Did you really turn hell into a pile of trash for the sake of your vanity? Noticing that the ghost child was listening to him carefully, he said, "The human nature is influenced by too many external factors. It is impossible to create a stable life trajectory for everyone. This is life. As a human being, you have to admit this. I thought that what we cultivators should do was not to fuss over whether the wicked were punished or the good were rewarded. Instead, we should think about how to make this world a little more good and a little less evil. Doing meaningful things instead of catering to one's so-called good and evil Taoist heart was what a cultivator should really pursue. Taking precautions in advance is far more meaningful than investigating after the fact." Hengji said, "You can't possibly inspire everyone." Lu Xiaoyi said, "Of course I can't. No one could do it. Even the heavenly Tao can't do it, let alone me? But this kind of hell can calm a soul's nature, making them more peaceful and less violent. As long as I can influence a certain proportion, it will be a huge number in the universe. In fact, you know very well that those who are truly evil only make up a small portion of the evil people. Most of them aren't born evil. Most of them took this step under special circumstances. Everything I've done in hell is to help these people." Hengji nodded. "Okay, I roughly understand what you mean. This is a new reincarnation. If that's the case, then I have nothing to say. I can only wish you good luck." Lu Xiaoyi replied, "No, I'm wishing us good luck. Everyone will have a share in the new reincarnation." Hengji ignored his arrogance. "I cultivate the soul-leaving Tao. I've been in hell for many years. I can probably track down the whereabouts of those living souls. 300 years. I'll give you 300 years for the new reincarnation. If your approach is wrong, I'll take back control of hell. You should know that even if the immortal court has declined, we can still easily control hell. But if you're right, I'm willing to support you. I'm Immortal Elder Hengji. I only exist for the great Tao." Lu Xiaoyi smiled. "There's no need for 300 years. In 100 years, 3 generations will be able to see it." Immortal Elder Hengji was one of the few immortals that Lu Xiaoyi had come into contact with who truly protected the great Tao. Of course, that was the case for now. Immortals were too scheming. No one could guarantee anything. Before her consciousness returned, Immortal Elder Hengji thanked him for his answer. "Your changes to hell are too unorthodox. But your intentions are good. It's a direction, even if you can't see it clearly now. As a reward for your sincerity in changing hell, I can provide you with a piece of information that might help you. You should have heard of the ancient blood Jesek. I heard that a few years ago, a few ancient blood immortals died. Before they left, they expressed their dissatisfaction with some cultivators in the lower realm. You have to be careful. Not only you, but also your friends." Immortal Elder Hengji had achieved her goal. She floated away, leaving Lu Xiaoyi to ponder the meaning of her last sentence. The ancient blood Jie sect. He had first heard of this sect from Lu Yuzi, and it was because of Zerg's red tide. During that incident, all 4 of them had been deeply involved in it. This was probably why Immortal Elder Hengji had warned him about it. Immortals were particular about saying 30% of what they said, leaving 70% for you to ponder. For Immortal Elder Hengji, who was still making a living in the immortal court, it was normal that she didn't want to offend her peers. But the meaning was clear. Because the 4 of them had broken Zerg's red tide, they had directly caused the destruction of Zerg's red tide in the main world. It wasn't wrong to say that the 4 of them were the most responsible for the karma. How many ancient blood Jie sect immortals had died in the lower realm? That meant that there was a possibility that they would come looking for trouble after they were attached. However, he still didn't know how they would do it. Taoists and swayed back and forth. He was very curious. "Escort, why did that old woman come looking for you? Could it be that she took a liking to you and wanted you to be her son-in-law?" Since this guy was still joking with him without restraint, Lu Xiaoyi didn't mind tricking him. Old Sin, you've been exposed. Fairy Hengji wanted me to pay attention to which Kuan cultivators you've been fooling around with in the lower realm all these years. If my supervision is meritorious and I report it well, she won't pursue the matter in the underworld. She might even secretly help me. Tell me, should I report it or not? Daoist Sun was shocked at first, but after thinking carefully, he immediately understood. He laughed and said, "You're good, Escort Lu. You want to trick me into revealing the secrets of my private life? Do you think it's that easy? Are you dreaming?" Chapter 2405. Do you know about the ancient blood-severing sect, Old Man Sun? Lu Xiaoyi went straight to the point. Daoist Sun looked at him in surprise. He knew that swordsman must have asked this question for a reason. Do you know the basics? Lu Xiaoyi nodded. I know the gist of it. What I want to know now is, if a few immortals from the ancient blood-severing sect fall and descend to the mortal world, what will they do? If they want to come to the main world to settle some karma, what will they do? Daoist Sun's expression turned serious. He already understood what Hengji and swordsmen were talking about. Zerg's red glow was a hot topic in the cultivation world of the main world. Everyone knew about it, and it wasn't a secret. Especially for someone as well-informed as Daoist Sun, he knew many secrets that others didn't. The ancient blood-severing sect is a very special orthodoxy in the immortal court. That's because they're different from other sects. This was a very powerful sect in the early days of the immortal court. Back then, bloodline power was rampant, and it was the initial stage of cultivation. But as time passed, cultivation theories continued to evolve. Sects like Taoism and Buddhism began to rise, but bloodline power only became thinner and thinner. As time passed, their decline was inevitable. This situation made the ancient blood-severing sect very unhappy. But the trend was irresistible, and the nobility of their bloodline couldn't be maintained, so it wasn't surprising that they were at the end of their road in the main world. The immortal court is quite powerful, and without a foundation in the lower realms, they're basically one less immortal after one dies. This made them an oddball in the immortal court. You can think of them as hoodlums of the immortal court. They don't care because they don't pursue too high a goal. Of course, immortals who rely on their bloodline don't have much of a future in the cultivation world where the great Tao is the most important. Daoist Sun briefly introduced the ancient blood-severing sect's position in the immortal court, then began to analyze them in depth, taking advantage of their seniority and abandoning all restraint. This is a typical characteristic of them, because there's no path forward. Those who value their bloodline will lose their perception of the great Tao. To them, it's harder than ascending to the heavens to make any achievements in the great Tao. How can they give up their bloodline if they seek the Tao? As a result, their behavior was very unconventional, and they became the group that was least like immortals in the immortal court. Millions of years ago, there were golden immortals above them, so they didn't dare to act rashly. Now that the epoch had changed, the universe was in chaos, and the immortal court couldn't even take care of itself. Everyone was in danger, and these ancient blood immortals were acting strangely. It was inevitable that people's minds would change. At this critical juncture, who would be willing to obediently surrender? Obey the orders of the heavens? Lu Xiaoyi could completely understand. Is the arrival of the new era the last handful of soil to bury them? Daoist Sun nodded. Exactly. Bloodlines could only be maintained in this era, relying on some ancient blood immortals to show their existence. The new era would only place more emphasis on the great Tao. Those who relied on their bloodline instincts would be forced into a desperate situation. Times had changed. The universe was about to enter the era of self-cultivators, an era where they relied on their intelligence and not their instincts. Therefore, it was extremely difficult for them to leave behind immortal seeds for themselves. Was he looking for a suitable ancient beast? Or was it the bloodline orthodoxy of body cultivators? It was a difficult choice. Lu Xiaoyi was silent. He was well aware of the humiliation of being a human but having to fuse with an ancient beast, as well as the limitations of human body cultivators. Daoist Sin's explanation was thorough. Being born as a human but fusing with an ancient beast is unacceptable to the ancient blood cultivators. Although they are eccentric and impudent, they are also the proudest and most conservative group. Although there are few human bloodline body cultivators, there are still some. However, their bloodlines have been diluted for millions of years, so they no longer have the possibility of climbing back to the immortal realm. Therefore, planting immortal seeds in them is meaningless. In short, it's a dead end for them to obtain immortality in the lower realms through the great Tao of innate and postnatal Daos, the past, the future, and other methods without revealing themselves. Daoist Sin's expression turned solemn. Therefore, they had no choice but to take the risk and directly invade the bodies of the cultivators of the lower worlds, changing their minds, bodies, and bloodlines in order to fight for a chance to become immortals. Lu Xiaoyi narrowed his eyes. Can immortals accomplish all this without any hindrance? Don't they have to worry about any repercussions? Daoist Sin sighed. Of course the lower realm half-immortals won't accept it. Moreover, it's a matter of consciousness, so there's basically no chance of failure in such a process. It's completely forced and the strong bullying the weak. How can there be a good result? However, there are such tragic half-immortals in the immortal realm, but there are also tragic half-immortals in the lower realms. Daoist Sin slightly shook his head in response to Lu Xiaoyi's puzzled gaze. In the cultivation world of the main world, there is actually such an orthodoxy, a realm, and a wonder. The people there follow the ancient principles of cultivation. They don't seek the great Tao, nor do they seek flexibility. Instead, they instinctively tap into the depths of their own potential, hoping to achieve a perfect fusion between their bodies and nature. However, their methods were also gradually marginalized in the cultivation world of the main world. Contrary to the ancient Blood Jie sect, they didn't have any support in the immortal court, but they were the only Tao orthodoxy in their own realm and were still relatively prosperous. The ancient blood-severing sect hopes that its legacy can continue in the new era, while the cultivators of this wondrous land also hope to have a breakthrough in the new era. Therefore, both sides take what they need and play to their strength. They hit it off. They are. Lu Xiaoyi sighed. Ancient filth soil? Daoist Sin nodded. Exactly. You must have come into contact with the ancient sorcerer of filth soil? These people adhere to the rules and rely on their special environment to resist the development of cultivation history. As a result, they can't keep up with the trend of the times. In these millions of years, there are many half-immortal ancient sorcerer, but there is not a single immortal. This is where the filth soil's obsession lies. The ancient blood-severing sect and the ancient filth soil are a match made in heaven. They learn from each other's strengths and make up for their weaknesses. Lu Xiaoyi keenly noticed the problem. You make me wish. So, the filth soil half-immortal is willing to become the ancient blood immortal's seed? Daoist Sin chuckled. Yes. When people are forced into a corner, they will often do unreasonable things. I heard that through some kind of highest blood exchange ceremony in the filth soil, the ancient blood immortal's blood source will be planted and cultivated in the body. When the time is ripe, once the ancient blood immortal dies, this side will immediately inherit everything, including consciousness and spirit. This method is different from the immortals who rely on the subtle influence of the great Tao. This method is simple and crude. It is equivalent to having two thoughts in the ancient sorcerer, which needs time to slowly harmonize. However, in terms of bloodline, it can perfectly inherit the noble bloodline of the ancient blood immortal. Because both sides are willing, the heavenly Tao will not interfere. Only the collision of the two thoughts will have some unspeakable difficulties. I guess in the end, there will be a primary and secondary one, right? Chapter 2406. What's so special about this method? Lu Xiaoyi's expression was solemn. Daoistsen thought for a moment. I'm only relying on my experience and rumors from the immortal world. I haven't seen it with my own eyes, so I can only use it as a reference. The fusion of the ancient blood immortal and the ancient shaman ancestor has a great characteristic, which is that the power transfer is very fast. It's not like the imperceptible influence of ordinary immortals, which is slow and gradual. Instead, the instant the bloodline awakens, the ancient shaman ancestor's power will be greatly improved. However, after that, the growth will be as slow as a turtle's crawl. This is also a great characteristic of the bloodline orthodoxy. The disadvantage is that the collision of consciousness is very stiff, and it's very easy to have a split personality. Although the ancient blood immortal and the earth immortal world are bound by an oath, when it comes to the actual fusion of the two people's consciousness, how can it be clearly defined by a single sentence? When an earth shaman ancestor awakens his ancient bloodline in this way, when the consciousness of the ancient blood immortal takes the upper hand in his consciousness, I'm afraid that's when these people will want to do something. According to my estimation, in this kind of blood fusion, the ancient blood immortal will most likely have the upper hand. You guys who once ruined their plans in Zerg's red light will naturally become the target of these ancient blood shamans. This isn't strange. In a sense, the temperament of the ancient blood immortals is a bit like you swordsmen. They won't patiently wait for the right time. They will make plans for many years in the future and take their revenge now. They just want to be happy. In the immemorial era, this is the mainstream of the immemorial era. Lu Xiaoyi was vigilant. The appearance of the ancient blood shamans was an unrestrained force in the immemorial era of the origin world. They were like catfish in a pond. Because they didn't need to have any achievements in the great Tao, they had the capital to be unscrupulous. They might not dare to look for him, after all, his strength and reputation were there. However, his friends were very dangerous, especially those people who had been entrusted by him to explore the terrain of the Heaven's Choice continent. He had to find them as soon as possible. Oldson, thank you for your advice. This information is very important to me. At the very least, we've traveled together in the underworld, and we can be considered to have some sort of relationship. Don't be so pretentious about exchanging benefits. I won't stand on ceremony then. Where is the primordial filth? I can't trouble two people for the same thing. You have to give me a clear explanation. Daoistsen sighed. Based on his personality, he would never get involved in such a trivial matter, no matter who it was. But just as the sword cultivator had said, their current relationship had already gone beyond the scope of a normal exchange of interests. One of the biggest disadvantages of associating with this sword cultivator was that no matter who it was, they would be dragged into his shit sooner or later, and he would even make you do it willingly. Although the feces pit was smelly, it was very nutritious. There are two earths in the sky, the blessed land of oddity and the ancient filth earth. One is illusory and the other is real. It was said that at the beginning of the universe, at the beginning of the chaos, there were 13 purple clouds, which contained all things in the universe. However, among the 13 purple clouds, there was one that never bloomed. It was like a dead seed that was buried in the ground, not disappearing for billions of years. When there were many children, it was normal for there to be a mutant with dementia. However, in the world of cultivation, this situation was regarded as ominous by the cultivators and was widely spread. The establishment of the Tao by the three swans was the beginning of the cultivation of the universe. However, when the three swans established the Tao, there was no place to support the Tao of the universe. Therefore, the cultivators searched the universe to find a place that could be used to reverse the Tao of the universe. In the end, they settled on this purple cloud of deathly stillness. Therefore, for thousands of years, the Tao of the cultivation of the universe fell on this purple cloud of deathly stillness. However, this purple cloud of deathly stillness was very magical, as if it was born to resolve the Tao of cultivation. It was indifferent to the changes in the universe, but it thrived in this abnormal reverse. Therefore, there were realms and humans who cultivated on them. Because it was the reverse of the Tao of cultivation and the reflection of all the forces above, it was called the ancient filth earth in the world of cultivation. In fact, in this strange land the earth was not filthy. On the contrary, it was rich in resources and spiritual vigor. However, the traces of the Tao of the universe were weak in the filth earth. On the contrary, some ancient things could be widely spread there and eventually formed the Tao of the witchcraft. Taoist Sin was indeed an immortal. He knew the secrets of the cultivation world very well. In fact, there are many ways to go to the filth earth. However, for the cultivators of the lower world, there are basically only two ways. One is to be taken there by the filth earth cultivators. The other is if you have been to the oddly pure land, you can reverse the process and become a filth earth cultivator. Do you have any filth earth friends? I don't think so. There are many enemies. Lu Xiaoyi laughed. I know where the pure land is, so Old Sin, don't laugh at me. In that case, why don't we part ways here and do our own things? If there is a need in the future, let's talk again? Taoist Sin looked at him. You don't need my help? I haven't established my Tao yet, so I have some free time. These words came out of his mouth, but he regretted it the moment they left his mouth. He sighed in his heart, knowing that he had boarded the swordsman's pirate ship and would never be able to get off. Lu Xiaoyi directly rejected him. Old Sin, what can you help with? You can't fight, and I have to take care of you all the time. That's not cool. If you are really bored, why don't you come with me to the Heaven's Choice continent? I will go look for people, and you can go sightseeing. The two of them left as soon as they said so. Soon, they were projected to Zhou through the interior sky, then entered the negative space, and flew towards the Heaven's Choice continent. On the way, Lu Xiaoyi told him about his plan to divide the Heaven's Choice continent. Old Sin, you were an immortal before, so you definitely know more about all kinds of strange methods than us newbies. Why don't you waste some time here and find a feasible method? I know you have been accumulating merits for your own ascension to the immortal realm. There are hundreds of billions of people in this Heaven's Choice. Once we succeed, you will at least become a true immortal. If the matters in the underworld go smoothly, I think you can become a golden immortal. Even though Taoist Sin had seen a lot, he didn't expect these lower realm half-immortals to have such daring thoughts. You dare to snatch the job of the three graces? Lu Xiaoyi said disdainfully. This isn't the job of the three graces. Those who think this way are just looking for excuses for their own irresponsibility. Those who don't know the truth always place their hopes on the graces, but to us, this is just wishful thinking. The graces are the rules, and they will affect the progress of the cultivation world for a long time, just like the change of eras this time. But they won't put their attention on a certain person, a certain orthodoxy, or a certain realm's temporary rise and fall. The graces adjust the macro level. We cultivators are the ones who implement the micro level. You and I are very clear about this. All great cultivators are clear about this. Why should we deceive ourselves and others? The only difference is that we are the minority who dare to stand up and take on our own responsibilities. Before the new era comes, I think this is very important. Chapter 2407. As expected, Taoist Sin was dragged into this. Just like what he was worried about, he became more and more tied up by this swordsman. He didn't know if this was a good thing or a bad thing. Flying at extreme speed, the two streaks of light caused the cultivators coming and going to the Heaven's Choice continent to avoid them. In the cultivation world of the origin world, It used to be the world of true monarchs and young gods, but now it had become the world of half-immortals. A few months later, the two rushed into the Heaven's Choice continent. Lu Xiaoyi said goodbye. I'll go look for someone. Old Sin, you can do as you wish. Without waiting for Daoist Sin to reply, the swordsman had already disappeared without a trace. He knew that the swordsman's friend was also here to investigate. That was why the swordsman was worried that they would be attacked by the ancient blood ancestral shaman. This kind of anxiousness showed that he was doing his best for his friend's situation. He didn't know when he would be reduced to an accomplice of the swordsman, and then be prepared to accept his own karma at any time. Perhaps it was already considered that? From his perspective, the Heaven's Choice continent was different from the half-immortals. After all, the half-immortals spent most of their life learning how to reach higher realms, how to fight, and how to improve themselves. They didn't have enough time to cultivate their own hobbies and comprehend other things by analogy. He was the exact opposite. His million years of experience as a worldly immortal gave him an endless amount of time. Since he had no hope of rising up under the strict order system of the immortal court, he could only spend most of his time on things that were completely boring in the eyes of the lower realm cultivators. This allowed him to possess many methods that half-immortals simply couldn't possess. He was very clear that the reason why the swordsman wanted him to join was because of his skills. It was to prepare for the future division of the Heaven's Choice continent, and not to play a leading role. If it was before, he wouldn't have accepted such an arrangement. However, the trip to the underworld changed him. He learned that when distributing huge benefits, one must know how to share the profit. The swordsman had given him a very good lesson in this aspect. In fact, in a major event like the transformation of the underworld and the division of the Heaven's Choice continent, not only was it not beneficial for one person to monopolize the credit, it was harmful instead. High merit shakes the master, virtue is important and prudent. This was the eternal melody in the history of human development. Everyone who walked up in the end was the one who knew how to share the profits. When you distribute your merit, there are risks involved as well. When you're in trouble, you don't need to teach these people to stand up and protect you. Of course, they were actually protecting their own interests. This kind of relationship was the most inseparable, far surpassing the so-called friendship, promise, and so-called like-minded. Therefore, he no longer had any thoughts of monopolizing such a large piece of cake. He only needed to eat his share and be 70 or 80% full. He had learned a lot from his interactions with swordsmen, so much so that he could not comprehend it. Was this the style of a swordsman? He didn't blindly help swordsmen. He was very clear about his own strength. In the Heaven's Choice continent, whether it was in terms of connections or battle prowess, he couldn't be compared to swordsmen. He focused his energy on the mapping of the Heaven's Choice continent. Although it hadn't been long since he learned of this daring plan, he already had a general idea of how to complete it. There were many factors to consider, but the most important were 4 aspects. How to map. There were several stages. First, he would set up countless mapping points on the Heaven's Choice continent. The surface was one aspect, but the more important aspect was the underground, which required cultivators to drill in to complete. And this kind of arrangement was only to accurately record the internal surface of this huge adhesive body after millions of years when the great Tao of space collapsed. This was the prerequisite for splitting. How to split. This wasn't like using a knife to cut tofu. The surface of the adhesive body had strange shapes and couldn't be as smooth as a mirror. Countless factors had to be considered, such as underground rivers, caves, magma, the direction of spirit veins, the balance of the 5 elements, etc. This required a huge amount of manpower, and they had to be at the level of a true monarch. Only with their ability could they make the most appropriate choice based on the actual situation underground. How to protect the atmosphere. If you split a realm, the atmosphere above it would disappear, and there would only be one result. All the humans in the realm would die. Accurately cutting the atmosphere was also a skill. Cutting too much would be useless, as it would cause the realm to lose its light. The gravity of the realm wouldn't be able to hold on, and so much atmosphere would just be lost. If you cut too little, it wouldn't be enough to fulfill the needs of the living beings and plants in the realm, and it would be even more fatal. How to split the spirit veins? If the spirit veins weren't cut properly, it would end up turning a realm full of spiritual chi into an ordinary planet, artificially causing the realm to enter a period of withering spiritual chi. These were only a few aspects. In fact, there were far too many things that required attention. Even Taoistsen, who had an unusually developed brain, had a headache. This wasn't a plan that could be completed by one person alone. He needed helpers, a large number of helpers. But he also knew that these helpers could only be found by the swordsman and his friends. This was the division of labor. On this day, Taoistsen was carefully planning out the first step of how to reasonably arrange the underground mapping points when an aura appeared above his head. Lu Xiaoyi had appeared by his side. "Oldson, why don't you stay here by yourself? I'll probably have to go on a long trip. Let's meet in the land of the Yellow Dragon later." Taoistsen smiled wryly. He was well aware of the swordsman's intentions. He was too daring. "You didn't find your friends? Could they have returned to the land of the Yellow Dragon?" Lu Xiaoyi shook his head. "If they're in the land of the Yellow Dragon, then everyone is safe. I didn't find any traces of them in the land of Heaven's Choice. Moreover, the cultivators here didn't notice any signs of half-immortals fighting here in the past few decades. Therefore, there's only one place left for me to go." Taoistsen still wanted to persuade him. What if those ancient blood shamans didn't have time to make a move? "Have you thought about it?" Lu Xiaoyi smiled. "I've never thought about problems like this. I'll only consider the worst-case scenario. In that case, rushing over there is the only choice left. As for whether they made a move or not, it doesn't make any difference. If they made a move, I'll go over and take it for granted. If they didn't make a move, I'll tell them that it's best if they didn't make a move." Taoistsen sighed. "You swordsman, you're really..." Seeing Lu Xiaoyi's figure gradually disappear, which was a sign that he was about to enter the pure land of extraordinary virtue, Taoistsen's heart was filled with emotions. Was the ancient filthy earth that easy to go to? Although the shaman's performance in the origin world wasn't very satisfactory, and most of the cultivators in the cultivation world didn't care about their abilities, this was just the influence of the environment. Shamans weren't suited to the origin world's great Tao environment, but in the ancient filthy earth, everything happened to be adjusted. However, Lu Xiaoyi didn't seem to see this at all. Swordsmen had this kind of style. You had to admit that if you had such a swordsman as a friend, it would be a very happy thing. In the cultivation world of the universe, everyone was calculating their gains and losses. Under such circumstances, to have a friend who didn't do it for benefits, but for friendship, was very precious. He also wanted to have such a friend. Chapter 2408. Qing Xian and the other two were not in a good situation. Things were out of their expectations from the start, because they never thought that in the land of the Yellow Dragon, there would be a demigod who was obsessed with karma and vengeance. The three of them did not survey the terrain of Heaven's Choice together. Each of them was in charge of one area and did a rough survey of the shallow layer of Heaven's Choice's crust. Their goal was not to obtain accurate information about Heaven's Choice's crust, but to determine how many people were needed if they wanted to draw a relatively accurate map of the underground border. When they were working underground, their mobility was greatly restricted, and they lost the ability to move around a large area. This was a very dangerous environment for a demigod, especially for a swordsman. How to use a flying sword in the water underground was a problem that had troubled them for countless years. Emperor Xianyuan did not solve it. Li Wuya did not solve it, and neither did Lu Xiaoyi. Of course, it was also very difficult for the attacking side to unleash their full power. No matter what orthodoxy or branch of the great Tao you were from, as long as you were in the ground, all of your power would be absorbed. Earth-type spells were slightly better, but the final battle would undoubtedly develop into a battle between Tao realm cultivators. This was a very uncomfortable environment for both the attacker and the defender. The only thing they had in common was that it was very difficult for anyone to escape. Yan Cheng was the first to be attacked. She was different from Lu Xiaoyi. Lu Xiaoyi could use his perverted knowledge of Tao to launch a counterattack, but Yan Cheng's knowledge of Tao realm was very limited, and her control of the 5 elements was far from perfection. Therefore, her only choice was to go deeper, to a more complicated place in the core of the earth. She was fearless, but she wasn't stupid. She wasn't reckless enough to risk her life in such a disadvantageous situation. Moreover, this was obviously a premeditated action. She could not just go according to the other party's plan. Most importantly, she did not want the battle to spread too much, and in the end, she would have to trouble her 2 companions to rescue her. First, she would sink to avoid the opponent's attack, then wait for an opportunity to jump out of the ground and end it in space. The idea was good, but it didn't come to fruition. She immediately sensed that she was in danger. It was not through his perception, as he could not sense so far underground. Instead, it was from a friend of his from Tianzi mainland. They had been to Tianzi for many times, and they were from Orthodox Taoism. Just like Qing Xian, it was easy for them to get support from their connections here. Someone had sensed the changes in the underground and informed him immediately. He then informed Qing Xian immediately, and the 2 of them rushed over together. The underground might have a huge impact on swordsmen, but it was different for Dharma cultivators. Although they were also restricted, Taoist cultivators were confident that their restrictions weren't the greatest. They had the confidence to deal with any enemy underground, no matter who they were. Therefore, he followed the smoke from the place where it sank. The result was very smooth. The 2 orthodox Taoists had many tricks up their sleeve. Even though they were underground, they seemed to be at ease. Soon, they approached the battlefield. Although they did not manage to kill their opponents, they soon found Smoky End. After that, an inexplicable spatial transfer had brought them to this inexplicable place. They were still tricked. Even with Qing Xian and Shi's vast knowledge, he did not understand the basic principle of being transported. This is not a trick from the cultivation world of the main world. I can be sure of this. Shi's expression was solemn. We can't even sense the inner and outer landscape here? What place in the universe has such characteristics? Smoky End was also very doubtful. Qing Xian did not speak. He had some thoughts, but he was not sure. Fly towards that star. When we get there, the truth will be revealed. In the distance, there was a yellow star. It was huge but also unfamiliar. The strange thing about this place was that they couldn't pinpoint it. Everything was in chaos, and there was no astrology to provide a basis. They couldn't sense the inner and outer landscape. It felt like they were in a reverse space. However, they were very sure that this was the main world and not the reverse space. There were also many strange places. For example, the power of Tao here was very weak. It was not that there was no power, but it was vaguely an ancient power that dominated this space. It was as if they had come to the ancient times. The closer they flew to the star, the stronger this feeling became. Before they reached the yellow star, the 3 of them could roughly guess where this place was. Ancient filthy earth. It should be right. Now the problem is, how do we go back? Shi asked. Qing Xian smiled bitterly. If we want to leave this space, the prerequisite is that the filthy earth cultivators lead the way. Or, have any of you been to Ajing Pure Land? Smoky End and Shi shook their heads. Smoky End snorted. Little E said he has been there. There is no place that he hasn't been to. These shamans brought us here. Are they going to attack little E at the same time in Yellow Dragon? Qing Xian shook his head. Senior sister, don't think too much. I think we should think more about ourselves. That guy will be fine. Ancient filthy earth. The shamans here don't need to report to the inner and outer landscape. They have their own system. They brought us here not to be guests but to treat us to a meal. Don't fly forward. Let's find a place to wait for them. I want to see why these shamans brought us here. Smokey N snorted. What other purpose can there be? They are just seeking revenge. Have you killed any shamans? Qing Xian and Shishi shook their heads. Smokey N raised his eyebrows. During the Second Universe War, how many supremes and great shamans did Xian Yuan kill? Is this the reason? It doesn't seem possible. As for shamans, only little E has killed them. He killed 2 in Winged Sky. Are they putting the blame on us? They don't dare to find that troublemaker. Do they think we are weak and easy to bully? Qing Xian shook her head. It can't be because of this. There is no need to guess. Since they are here and want to kill us, they have to be prepared to pay the price. Senior sister, when we fight later, don't be too far away from us. We have to take care of each other. This is the world of shamans. Be careful. She had to remind the swordsmen. They would get carried away when they fight. In this unfamiliar place, there were opponents everywhere. They didn't know how many shamans there were in the filthy earth. To them, this was a difficult situation. Being separated meant death. The 3 of them started to retreat slowly. They thought of many ways to leave this unfamiliar place, but to their disappointment, they didn't find anything. So far, there was only one way to leave, and that was to find the way to Qijing Pure Land. However, the 3 of them didn't have any experience in this area. Moreover, even if they found it, they could only solve their own problem. What about their companions? It seemed to be a hopeless situation. Chapter 2409. The 3 of them did not have much time to familiarize themselves with the environment. As they retreated, auras approached. Shishi laughed. Ancestral shaman of Earth? They are the ones who get beaten up in the main world. I don't know why they are doing this. With the strength of the 3 of us, each of us can deal with a few of them, right? Even if the environment here is advantageous to them. Then, what is the reason for them to take the risk? Did they not think of the consequences? Qing Xian said solemnly, the change of epoch is the biggest reason. Anything can happen. It is hard to retaliate during the establishment of Tao. This is their chance, they don't need to establish Tao anyway. There were 9 auras coming, they were very powerful existences, they were already thinking highly of them. They were dressed in standard shaman attire, hair draped over their shoulders, they were barefooted, they had all kinds of shaman staffs in their hands, they were from unknown demon beasts. The leader of the group stood in the distance, while the other 8 spread out on both sides. Boundless and boundless ancient power unbridled enveloped the entire space. In this place they were the kings. I am greed, my ancient blood remains, in order to complete the karma of the main world. I am doing this, do you understand? Qing Xian and the others immediately understood. This was the ancient blood Jie sect using the body of ancestral shaman of Earth to complete the karma. The reason why he pointed it out so openly was because at the half-immortal stage, meaningless karma would leave traces in the sect of the 3. If they killed without any karma, the other half-immortals would easily target the ancient filth soil. As long as they had a sudden impulse and made a divination, they would not be able to hide it from others. But if there was karma, it would be impossible to do so. In other words, if they encountered trouble here, their sect would not have any abnormalities, because they were completing the karma. Yan Chen was the most straightforward. He slashed with his sword. You want to kill us? Sure. Pay with your life. The battle immediately began. There were the 9 luminaries in the sky, Greed, Juman, Lutsuan, Wenxiu, Lianjin, Wuxiu, Pajuan, Zufu, and right by. In the mortal world, this was just a legend, but in the immortal court it really did exist. It was the immortal position that the ancient blood Jie sect held in the immortal court. They were respected but had little power. It was only because they had lived long enough and attained immortality early that they were able to occupy the famous 9 luminaries system. However, in the collapse sequence of the immortal court, they were also collapsed as a system. The defeat of the 9 luminaries alone destroyed more than half of the ancient blood Jie sect's strength in the immortal court. But at the same time, because of their broken system, 9 ancient blood ancestral sorcerers came out at the same time during the ancient blood awakening of the Edo Earth sorcerers, and they quickly gained a firm foothold in the Edo Earth. The real ancestral sorcerer of Earth was unwilling to participate in such karma, so the brother and sister came. However, they could not control these immortal spirits of ancient blood, whose bodies had been occupied by the immortals of ancient blood. This was the truth of this battle. Shi released the formation that he was best at. Qing Xian stood in the middle and Yan Chang supported from behind. The 3 of them were quite familiar with each other as they had fought together countless times. They knew very well what strategy they should use. It was not suitable for them to scatter and fight in a chaotic battle. Under the disadvantage of the number of people, splitting up meant that they were fighting on their own. It was beneficial for the opponent to target them one by one and defeat them one by one. Therefore, they could not scatter now. They had to stand firm and fight with their strength. Among the 3 of them, Shi and Yanchang were yang spirits and had the ability to reincarnate. It was inevitable that they would be killed in a fierce battle. When they reincarnated, they needed to have companions to support them. Otherwise, if they were killed once, the next crisis would follow. The small Xuanwu formation was Shi's choice. This was a small formation that was very slow to perceive the changes in the Tao state. Its real defense was against those who relied on one's strength to defeat 10 opponents. It had a miraculous effect in the defense of body cultivators. It did not care about the Tao state, but only used the thickness of the surging primordial qi as the foundation to form a primordial qi barrier within a small range. Its function was to provide a safe house for the 3 of them. This was a very practical and wise choice under the disadvantage. He did not rashly choose a bigger formation in an attempt to provide protection for the 3 of them at the same time. Under the pressure of 9 opponents, such an approach was very naive. Instead, he chose an extremely small Xuanwu formation. He poured all of his primordial qi into it and established a connection with his 2 companions. His companions could choose to return to the formation to avoid being hurt by the enemy. Shi could also choose to make his own judgment and forcefully pull his companions back when they were at a disadvantage. This kind of 3-person formation was the product of long-term cooperation. It was the most suitable response under the current situation. Because blindly defending would only result in being beaten, they had to fight back. The ones to fight back were Qing Xian and Yan Chang. They maintained a certain range of mobility outside the small Xuanwu formation and attacked together. In order to achieve the effect of the attack, dancing around wildly with tortoise fists was not the fighting style of cultivators at their level. In an environment where they were outnumbered, every strand of primordial qi had to be used where it was useful. The formation of the 3 was such an echelon. The main attack, the secondary attack, the safe house. This was the only way to ensure that they did not lose each other, and that they could still attack freely under a certain degree of defense. This kind of fighting style had brought them victory from the beginning. Lu Xiyuan and Lianzhen of the 9 luminaries were killed by Qing Xian and Yan Chang one after another. Unfortunately, they did not get a second chance. The discomfort of the ancient blood ancestral shamans was only temporary. They were all veterans with rich combat experience. After the initial discomfort, they quickly adjusted themselves. It was very difficult to concentrate their firepower to kill one of them. Qing Xian's Dao technique was used to the point of perfection. The problem was that he was only in the primordial spirit realm and did not have the ability to be reborn. Therefore, he could not die. Once he died, he would really die. The ancient blood ancestral shamans were different from ordinary half-immortal ancestral shamans. They had their own unique grasp of the rhythm of the battle. In such a battle, there was no hope to escape. Shi saw this and was anxious in his heart. "Ma Lu, we can't fight like this. If we waste time, we won't be able to outlast them. Moreover, the earth is close at hand. Who knows if the real ancestral shamans will come to help? If they don't come now, it doesn't mean that they won't come after we kill one or two of them." They could guess the mentality of the earth ancestral shamans. They hoped that these ancient blood ancestral shamans could solve the problem by themselves. In a sense, they could also deceive themselves and extricate themselves. However, once these ancient blood ancestral shamans suffered losses, it was hard to say if they could still remain calm. After all, even if they were ancient blood ancestral shamans, they were actually once companions. There was still the shadow of the earth ancestral shamans in their blood spirit. This was a connection that could not be severed. Yan Chang also opposed this kind of fighting style. There might be some effect in the beginning. However, now that the 9 luminaries were united, they had cooperation with each other. It was extremely difficult to rely on sneak attacks to kill one of them. Since we have to disperse sooner or later, we might as well disperse early. At least we can still earn 2. The pressure of 9 people together is too great. Chapter 24:10. Qing Xian was unmoved. He was in charge of the entire battle mobilization. Even though his combat experience might not be as rich as Lu Xiaoyi was good at one-on-one combat. In terms of team coordination, Lu Xiaoyi might not be as good as him. Seeing that his 2 companions were a little anxious, he made his intention clear. "I have been wondering where is the limit of the so-called ability improvement of the ancient blood immortals after integrating with the bloodline of the ancestor sorcerer? We are not strangers to battle. We should be very clear about how unreliable the so-called sudden improvement of the combat effectiveness is. It is something that needs a long time to polish. It is not something that can be achieved by eating a strength pill. In particular, there is not only the recovery and integration of the bloodline between them, but also the more terrible struggle for control of the spirit. I don't think this problem can be perfectly solved in just a few hundred years. Look at how they are not in a hurry when attacking. They are not going easy on us, but they are familiarizing themselves with the application of their new body in the extreme state. Otherwise, we will not have the chance to talk here." This was a fact. The pressure brought by the 9 ancient blood wizards was not as great as they imagined. This showed that they were breaking in. They were not breaking in with each other, but breaking in between the ancient blood immortals and the ancestor sorcerer of earth in each body. No one would easily give up the control of the body. Usually, it could be discussed, but in the face of life and death, they would not back down. The ancient blood immortals thought that they should be the masters because they had seen a lot. The ancestor sorcerer of earth thought that, of course, they should be the masters because they were more familiar with the limits of the body's ability. Qing Xian smiled viciously, thinking about it normally. We should take advantage of the fact that they are still arguing about the control of the body and immediately attack, so that we can get the results. But don't forget that because they are not familiar with their bodies, they are ready to retreat at any time. We have attacked several times before, but in fact, they were defeated because they did not care about their face and retreated. If we want to really kill them, we need to let them loose. I want to bet that they can't completely control the body in the end. The chaos at the moment of life and death is our chance. After reaching the half-immortal realm, it was very difficult to kill another half-immortal of the same realm. If the opponent didn't want to fight to the death, they actually had a lot of other ways to compromise. Especially when they had a lot of people, they didn't have to take any unnecessary risk. In any case, they had a lot of people, so they could afford to drag it out. As a result, Qing Xian and Smoky Puppet's ingenious attack combinations had a beginning but no end. This was because they were facing the cunning soul of the immortal of ancient blood. In the millions of years of the immortal court, it was ingrained in their bones to play it safe, even if they were the combative type in the immortal court. Being belligerent was different from fighting to the death. The disparity in numbers made it difficult for Qing Xian and the other two to restrain themselves from viciously beating them up. Because the other 8 people's reinforcements would arrive in an instant, they would always miss the opportunity like this, wasting their origin energy and exquisite coordination for nothing. Qing Xian finally decided, we will wait with them. Observe the combat habits they develop while familiarizing themselves with their bodies. When they develop the courage to fight, I have something to serve them. Qing Xian had seen this battle very clearly. They couldn't keep defending. This was exactly what these ancient blood ancestral sorcerers wanted. They also couldn't fight a terrible battle where some were injured and some were killed, which might attract the ancient blood ancestral sorcerers' hatred for a common enemy. The only way to solve this problem was to get rid of them all in one go. This required planning and understanding of their fighting characteristics. Then, they would gamble with the lives of the 3. This kind of tug-of-war continued for several months. Relying on the profound foundation of the half-immortals, both sides were not worn down by this kind of tug-of-war. However, the ancient blood ancestral sorcerers gradually perfected their control of their bodies in this kind of battle. They felt that it was time to end all of this. Zhuofu was somewhat puzzled. Why do I feel that they are not using their full strength? With the status of these 3 people in the half-immortal layer of the origin world, they shouldn't be so ordinary? Defeating armies disagreed. They are not ordinary. With the strength of the 3 of them, they were able to resist the 9 of us for several months without showing any signs of exhaustion. You call them ordinary? Not everyone has the ability of that swordsman. You can't artificially elevate them just because they are always together. Tan Lang waved his hand. Don't argue, I have already made up my mind. Later, we will prepare to pull in the net. These several months are not short. We have also made great progress in our familiarity with our bodies. It is impossible to expect us to be completely the same, so there is no need to be perfect. What I am worried about is that the 3 of them are deliberately stalling for time to wait for reinforcements. Even if we have arrangements, we can't delay here for too long. Giant Gate was puzzled. Very few people come to the ancient filth earth, and there is no possibility of a large group of cultivators coming in. What are you worried about? We are not afraid of stalling. This is what we are good at. Tan Lang coldly said, Lu Xiaoyi, there is no need for a large group of people to come, just him alone. I am afraid we will not be able to handle it. Everyone was speechless. As the saying goes, a person's reputation is like a tree's shadow. They did not have any good methods to deal with the most outstanding half-immortal in the lower realm. Previously, when they were in the Winged Angel, they had used the strategy of capturing the leader to capture all the bandits, but it had failed. Now, they planned to use a different method. First get rid of the small trouble, then deal with the big trouble. Under the pressure of this fierce person, everyone finally reached a consensus. Tan Lang slightly smiled. I guess these 3 little fleas must also be thinking about something? They will never know that even if the knowledge of an immortal cannot be directly transformed into the most direct strength, it can also determine the direction of the battle. Is the 9-star formation ready? On the other side, Qing Xian and the other 2 were also keenly aware of some abnormalities. They are going to make a move. Qing Xian became relaxed. These few months were also very torturous for him. Lu Xiaoyi was not here. He needed to take his companions out. He did not have a strong force like Lu Xiaoyi, so he could only think of ways to deal with things that he was good at. What is the biggest weakness of the ancient blood immortals? It is their blind persistence. They indulge in the nobility of their bloodline and do not want to improve. They think that their bloodline can solve everything. They turn a blind eye to the changes in the cultivation world, thinking that it is persistence, but in fact it is isolating themselves from the mainstream cultivation. Therefore, they can control the body of the ancient sorcerer of filth earth. Although they can exert the power of their bloodline to the extreme, they also lose the ability to use those strange tools of the ancient sorcerer. Let's let them see what is orthodox Taoism. What is rich and overbearing? Shishi, are you ready? Shishi laughed. I have a belt full of treasures. I am worried that I have nowhere to use them. Today I will serve them well. Qing Xian looked at Yan Chen. Kill them to death. This time, we don't need the safe house, senior sister. You can do whatever you want. Chapter 24:11. As soon as Lu Xiaoyi appeared in the ancient filth, he knew that he had fallen into a trap. The ancestors of sorcerers were not fools. The Five Rings Group of Four was famous in the cultivation world of the universe. How could they forget his existence? The real ancestors of sorcerers who had not been planted by the ancient blood immortals did not participate in the encirclement of Qing Xian and the others. On one hand, they did not want to be involved in the danger of karma with the Taoists. On the other hand, they had to guard against people who sneaked into the filth. They had been managing the ancient filth for millions of years and knew this space like the back of their hand. They knew that unless the immortals came, there were only two ways for the half-immortals to come here. One was to be brought in by the ancestors of sorcerers, and the other was through the odd Pure Land. The former was obviously impossible, but if it was the latter, while they couldn't stop it, they could control the location of the projection to be where they wanted it to be. For example, the purple mist that had been dead since the beginning of the chaos, and had been providing the eddy lands with the construction of realms in the recent millions of years. This was a little risky. It was like using a golden cauldron to catch a thief, but they did not have any other good ideas. Other than using the purple gas, they had no other way to fix the projection of the creature from the odd Pure Land. This was beyond their ability. In order to prevent the swordsman from randomly appearing in the ancient filth, they could only take this risk. All the major cultivators in the universe knew how terrifying an unrestrained escort Lu was. This was not a rumor, but something that had been proven countless times. This strand of purple gas was not like the other supernatural entities that were buried in the depths of the realm without being seen. Instead, it was openly hanging above the filthy soil, receiving the reversal of the cultivation process of the entire universe. Through miraculous transformations, these negative factors were converted into the energy of the filthy soil. This was already an existence similar to Hong, except that it might not have wisdom. When the chaos was first created, 13 purple gas appeared and evolved the universe. Only this one was the most special. Of course, no one was worried that it would be stolen. This was something that Hong used to support the reversal of the great Tao. No one could steal it. Not the cultivators of the lower realm, not the immortals. Perhaps even the golden immortals would not dare to touch this thing, because this might be the forbidden possession of Hong. Of course, in the long history of the filth, the sorcerers had thought of using this purple gas for something. After millions of years of continuous experimentation, they had also figured out a few sets of limited ways to utilize the purple gas. For example, using the purple qi to rebuild his bloodline. Yes, this was done with the help of the ancient blood immortal. What they were doing was mainly a kind of worship ceremony. By setting up a huge prayer wheel around the purple gas, they could achieve a convenient passage to the upper realm. This was extremely important to the embittered earth. Over the past million years, they had gradually formed a system of using prayer wheels to improve the talents of earth shamans, which was the greatest help for the current earth shamans and ancestral shamans. The witchcraft system loved this kind of mysterious totem worship the most, not to mention that this purple gas was really miraculous. It was the totem of the primordial filth. After millions of years of spinning and absorbing, this huge prayer wheel had slowly formed its own prayer wheel space. The core was that strand of purple gas, while the outer layer of the prayer wheel space was filled with the countless inferior totems of the Eddylands, including all kinds of divine beasts unique to the Eddylands, and also the spiritual sustenance of human magi. There were many applications for the prayer wheel, but the main one was how to help the earth shamans cultivate. One of the applications was that it could seal the foreign cultivators who were projected from the pure land of oddity in the prayer wheel, and make them spin with the wheel forever. In history, there had been a few great enemies in the Eddyland. They were all trapped inside when they tried to force their way into the Eddylands, and ended their spinning lives just like that. This was the biggest secret of the Eddylands shamans, which was only known to the ancestral shamans. It was also their unsolvable trick, and they would only use this trick on the most difficult opponent. It was unknown whether it was Lu Xiaoyi's luck or misfortune, but when they knew that escort Lu might come here looking for trouble, the ancestral shamans activated this function of the prayer wheel without hesitation, and waited for the big fish to fall into the trap. And now the big fish had come. Lu Xiaoyi felt that he was walking in an endless bizarre and variegated world. It was like the history of the Eddylands. Historical figures, cultivators, all kinds of living beings, all kinds of major events, they were all coming at him in this rotating wheel. Because it was a prayer wheel, he might not be able to get out of it for the rest of his life, and even if he spun in the wheel for the rest of his life, he might not be able to finish reading the history of the Eddylands. 1,000,000 years was too long, and there were countless people, countless events, endless. He immediately realized that he might have fallen into the trap of the ancestral sorcerers of Earth. However, he could not see the situation outside the prayer wheel. There were dozens of half-immortal ancestral sorcerers waiting outside. They were afraid that this famous escort Lu was different from the rest, and would come out from the prayer wheel. The purple gas was indeed magical, and after 1,000,000 years of spinning, the prayer wheel had also been infected with this magic. After a while, escort Lu Crow was still spinning inside. Looking from the outside, this person looked like the countless totems carved on the prayer wheel. The only difference was that the other totems were still, but this little swordsman was running desperately on the wall of the prayer wheel. He was like every powerful figure in history who was trapped in the prayer wheel. They thought that they could run out of this world, but in the infinite rotation of the prayer wheel, this journey was destined to be endless. An ancestral shaman asked, "This person has been trapped in the prayer wheel, and it seems that he can't get out. But if we really want to kill him, we don't know how long it will take to keep running like this. This person has a long life left, and he won't die even if all of us here die. Do we have to keep waiting like this? Do we need to take some measures?" "Don't be impatient," an old ancestral shaman said, "be calm. These people have karma with the Eddylands, and it's not a big deal to take their lives. But we must eliminate the root of the problem, and no one can escape. Let him spin first, and we can wait for those ancient blood ancestral shamans to solve the problem, and then let them solve the problem here. What if the three of them run away? Or kill the ancient blood ancestral shamans? Then if we keep this swordsman alive, there will still be room for negotiation." This was an old man's words, and all the ancestral shamans nodded in agreement. The old ancestral shaman continued, "But we must be prepared to go in and intervene. This swordsman is really strange. He has experienced countless things in his life, and many fatal situations have been solved by him in the end, so we must not let down our guard. We must prevent him from breaking out of the prayer wheel or causing damage inside. This person is the most famous shit-stirrer in the main world. If we are not careful, we must not let him mess up the foundation of our existence, and then the loss will outweigh the gain, and the Eddy lands will be in real trouble. Chapter 24:12. Lu Xiaoyi began his spinning life. Until now, he still didn't know that he was running in a spinning wheel. He only thought that he was running in the long scroll of the ancient dirt Earth's history. But even if he didn't know about the prayer wheel, it didn't mean that he didn't know about the danger of jumping into a trap. Because in this dimension, he couldn't get out. Even with his superb spatial abilities, he couldn't jump into any dimension here. This was a very strange situation. But he was still running because he couldn't stop in the prayer wheel. It wasn't that he was running, but the ancient dirt Earth's history was spinning. Passively, he could only face the overwhelming presence. He had used all of his Tao state's abilities while running. Although he gained a little from separating the structure of this dimension, it wasn't enough for him to escape. And this little gain was that it wasn't the history that was trapping him, but a strand of purple qi. Combined with the legends he heard from Taoists about the ancient filth earth, he roughly understood what was holding him back. To the current him, perhaps only this ancient wondrous object formed when the primordial chaos was born could truly leave him at a loss. This was a wondrous object that Hongdu could not change. It could only create this strange world on its own. Among the 36 known innate Taos, only one that he could feel clearly in the prayer wheel was the time Taos. Under the influence of the purple qi, the ancient dirt Earth's dimension was able to block part of the innate Taos. But in history, the time Taos were still the same. Lu Xiaoyi had a big heart. He didn't rush to attack aimlessly like a headless fly. Instead, he calmed his mind and immersed himself in the process of admiring the ancient dirt Earth's history. Immersing, not denying, the goal was that when he fully immersed himself in the history, he would have a chance to get close to the core of the problem, the innate purple qi. Intuition told him that this was the key to solving the problem. Hence, in the eyes of the ancient dirt Earth's shamans, this silly swordsman was running around the prayer wheel like an idiot, round after round, tirelessly. It was like a mural where a figure was shuttling back and forth in a long scroll of history. The person shuttling back and forth didn't do anything, but they, who were watching from the outside, were on tenterhooks because of this sword cultivator. Separate people. If it was an ordinary half-immortal who was trapped here, the grand sorcerers would have already dispersed and left him to fend for himself in the prayer wheel. However, if it was Abbot Lu who was trapped here, any unconventional, childish, and abnormal actions of his would cause them to speculate endlessly. Why would he do that? What was his goal? Would escort Lu, who was so famous in the cultivation world of the universe, do something meaningless? The more he thought about it, the more uncertain he felt. The more he wanted to do something to feel at ease. Even if the swordsman was slashing around with his sword, they would still be able to accept it. However, he just had to run away like a fool. An ancestral shaman gritted his teeth. Actually, we can also enter. Stop him in the history of the tainted earth. If he runs like this, what really makes me upset is that I don't know what kind of ghost he will run out of. Many ancestral sorcerers agreed with him. This was not the feeling of one person, but the feeling of everyone. When a person's reputation began to spread in the universe, it would have such an inexplicable power that would make people restless and uneasy. Old Ancestor Nian frowned and finally decided, let's see. We won't have much of an advantage if we go in and snipe them. Moreover, we will lose our advantage in numbers. An ancestral shaman impatiently said, but we won't die in the prayer wheel. At most, we will be killed out. The key is to disrupt his rhythm. No matter what he is doing, we can't let him do as he pleases, right? Dozens of ancestral shamans were arguing outside. They could not be blamed for not being calm. It was just that this swordsman was too evil. They were afraid that by the time they realized something, it would be too late. Lu Xiaoyi ran and ran, running in the history of the tainted earth. All the things that had happened in the tainted earth, people, and totems came rushing to his face. These things were the things that the tainted earth shamans had prayed and worshipped for millions of years into the prayer wheel. It also included the witchcraft inheritance of the shaman bloodline for millions of years. To Lu Xiaoyi there was no need to learn. However, since he understood these things, these so-called ancestral shamans were just lambs on the chopping board to him in future battles. But he still couldn't get out because he had yet to find a way to deal with the purple qi. This was not something that could be approached through the innate Tao. He could feel it as if it was repelling everything, including the omnipresent Tao rules. Such an action gave him a sense of déjà vu. Thus, he released his newly created Tao, devouring new reincarnation and heaven's retribution. He wanted to know if his guess was right. There was no response. Did he guess wrongly? Or was there something else? As he ran, Lu Xiaoyi smiled coldly. He gathered his will of sword Tao and stabbed at the purple qi from afar. The prayer wheel's rotation suddenly stopped. From the previous uniform rotation, it suddenly became fast and slow. The expressions of the ancestral shamans outside the prayer wheel changed drastically. Some of them lost their cool and started cursing loudly. He is attacking the purple qi. This lunatic. How dare he? No one dared to attack the purple qi. No matter if it was the ancestral shamans of the tainted earth or the rebellious ones in history. They might not be able to do it, but more importantly, no one dared to do it. This was a spiritual object that was formed when the chaos was first born. In terms of status, it was even higher than the three graces. Even the three graces couldn't do anything to it. They could only place it here and let it form its own space. How could other existences affect it? Not even the Deluo golden immortals could. In the history of the tainted earth, there were some daring ones who had the thought of obtaining opportunities from the purple qi. But all of them disappeared without a trace. None of them had a good ending. But this swordsman dared to provoke the purple qi. From the way the prayer wheel was moving, it could be seen that not only did he provoke it, he also affected it. The ancestral shamans all looked at the oldest one. In the tainted earth, the shamans followed the oldest rule. The one who made the final decision was always the oldest one. The old ancestral shaman sighed and his eyes turned sharp. I heard that Abbot Lu's swordsmanship is unparalleled. Since the beginning, he has only relied on his flying sword. This has never changed. Our ancient shaman race also adheres to our ancient heritage and has never changed because of the changes in the outside world. Then, let us see if Abbot Lu's sword is sharper or our shaman race's back is tougher. All of you enter the prayer wheel and take turns to kill. If the person doesn't die, we won't stop. The ancestral shamans all agreed and entered the prayer wheel one after another. None of the dozens of ancestral shamans remained outside. They had to do this because the purple qi was related to the foundation of the tainted earth. This was a matter of life and death. Chapter 24:13. Dozens of ancestral sorcerers were thrown into the prayer wheel. From the outside, they also became little people running on the prayer wheel. However, they were running in the direction of history, while Lu Xiaoyi was going against history. The collision was inevitable. As Lu Xiaoyi was running, he felt a strong aura appear in front of him. An ancestral sorcerer transformed into a huge sorcerer Xiang, standing upright and taking big strides, like a train moving at full speed. In the prayer wheel, no one could stop. There was no way to dodge and move. There was no other way except for a head-on collision. The ancestral sorcerer shouted again and again. Every sound was like thunder. With a big step, the city and the mountains were like toys under his feet. The earth shook and the mountains shook. The apes were like Mount Tai. Lu Xiaoyi was silent and still maintained his usual rhythm. While running, he still had the mood to watch the history along the way and continued to use the will of the sword to stimulate the purple gas. Everyone had communicated with each other before. Was he playing dumb with him? As for the ancestral sorcerer in front, he was not worth a mention. He had been fighting for 3,000 to 4,000 years. What he was best at was this kind of head-on collision and fighting for the front line. Both sides approached each other rapidly. The ancestral sorcerer raised his banner high above his head and was about to smash it down. However, he did not expect the insignificant figure opposite him to suddenly change his speed. First, it paused, then it accelerated and rushed forward. The banner could not find the rhythm of swinging down in an instant. When he saw the figure of the opponent and swung down, there was a flash of light that swept past his neck. It was like two friends running in opposite directions. When they met, they raised their hands to say hello. When they met in an instant, they separated in an instant and continued to run in the scroll of history. However, Lu Xiaoyi was still running calmly and naturally. His footsteps were not messy at all. However, the sorcerer Xiang seemed to be drunk after a few steps. He staggered a few steps and a mountain under his feet tripped him and sent him flying. In such a sudden stumble, a red line under the neck suddenly split open, and the head of the eldest sprayed out in a spurt of blood. Only a pair of eyes were still wide open, and the mouth of the eldest one shouted, "What a fast sword!" To Lu Xiaoyi, this kind of battle made his blood boil. Not to mention the half-immortal realm, even after the true monarch realm, no one dared to cut him in half under such circumstances. This was his favorite way of doing things, killing to his heart's content and dying to his heart's content. With the appearance of the first ancestral sorcerer, the natives of the obsidian soil began to appear in front of him one after another. Similarly, they were unable to control themselves and refused to stop. History made it impossible for them to work together, because there was no point in the long river of time that could overlap. His blood was boiling and his killing intent was rising. Lu Xiaoyi's sword flashed and his sword intent surged uncontrollably. The purple qi finally loosened under such willpower. It was no longer completely lifeless and indifferent like before. However, this was still not enough. Outside the prayer wheel, the ancestral sorcerers were being reborn and restored. The smell of blood shrouded them. At this moment, they were no longer lofty and far-sighted half-immortal almighties. Instead, they were desperados whose homes were about to be destroyed because their foundations were damaged. As soon as they recovered, they immediately threw themselves back into the prayer wheel. Dozens of ancestral shamans used this method to express their attitude. They would not die in the prayer wheel. They could be reborn outside the prayer wheel. However, the swordsman could not be reborn. Once the swordsman was killed, he could only be reborn in the prayer wheel. As long as they persevered, as long as they formed a line and continuously pressured the swordsman, they would definitely be able to kill him once. After the first time, the subsequent times would be much easier. The ancestral shamans who were constantly pouncing on the swordsman could take advantage of the time when he was reborn to kill him continuously. Sooner or later, he would be killed to the point where he could never be reborn again. This was the strategy of the ancestral shamans. How many times had he died? No one could count. This kind of courage could not be counted. Once counted, it would be discouraging. This kind of fighting style required one to throw away their rationality and give themselves over to their instincts. Lu Xiaoyi did not count, he was too lazy to count. The pressure that the ancestral shamans gave him during the process of charging was the stepping stone for his sword intent to climb up. Only with a stronger intent could he create a gap in the purple qi. This purple qi had communicated with him before, even if it was through the transmission of an immortal. But what he did not know was, When this purple chi nurtured the rules of heaven and earth like the Hongmao, what was the relationship between the two? He knew that he should keep a distance between them and not tear apart the last layer of paper. He also did not want to have such a rich friend, but the problem was that he had to get out. He still did not know how Qing Xian and the other two were. Were they here? If they were not, where else could he go? His sword intent stimulated the purple chi. It only meant one thing: let me out. He did not mention the fact that he had already recognized the purple chi. It was to leave some leeway for both parties. But along the way, even if he had already killed hundreds of ancestral shamans and his sword intent was almost solid, the purple chi still pretended to be polite and perfunctory. Such a response put him in a dilemma. It was already impossible to get off. The ancestral shamans were battered and exhausted. The purple chi did not counterattack him, nor did it respond to him. It made him look like a clown in the prayer wheel. He knew very well what the purple chi was. He did not want to provoke such a thing. His previous provocation was just an attitude, not a real intention to do anything. But now, it seemed that he had no other choice but to follow this path to the end. At a place far enough away from the prayer wheel, there was a large number of supreme-level great shamans. They were not summoned by the ancestral shamans, but gathered because they felt that something was wrong with the prayer wheel. But they were ordered not to come close by the ancestral shamans who had died. In any world and force, when there was a battle, nothing would happen if you did not step forward. But if you interfered, if the ancestral shamans failed, these great shamans would not be able to escape. This was a tacit rule in the world of cultivation. Even a remote place like the earth of filth still recognized it. In their eyes, the prayer wheel had become a merry-go-round. Their own ancestral shamans risked their lives to rush in, and then were slashed out by a sword, without exception. There was no need to ask who the murderer was. In this universe, there were only a few people who could do this, but they did not understand why this big scourge was trapped in the prayer wheel. Even if they fought in the earth of filth space, at least they had the advantage of numbers. But in the prayer wheel, it was like a slaughterhouse. The huge prayer wheel had completely lost its usual rotation rhythm. It became fast and slow, bright and dark, and from time to time, it would swing a few times, making the great shamans frightened. They did not dare to imagine if something happened to the purple chi, would the ancient earth of filth still exist? Originally, the change of the era was enough to annoy them, but they did not expect that before the new era, they would be waiting for Lu Shidi. Chapter 24:14. Light flashed in the outer space of the earth. The nine-star formation was created by the ancient blood immortal when they were bored in the immortal court. It was an immortal formation. Of course, it no longer had the power of an immortal formation. But as long as it had 1 or 2% of its power, it was not something that the half-immortals of the main world could resist. Qing Xian reacted quickly. Before the ancient blood shaman's star formation was completed, he had already thrown out a bead. It was the star-fixing bead. When he cooperated with Lu Xiaoyi, he rarely used similar objects. It was not that he did not have them, but it was a kind of unyielding attitude. If the swordsman could fight without objects, so could he. But being able to do it did not mean that he had nothing. The foundation of the three pure ones was far beyond the imagination of ordinary people. Not only in the 5 rings 3 pure ones, but also in the alliance of 3 pure ones in the universe as a seated candidate for the establishment of Tao. Never underestimate the orthodox Taoism. Their forces were spread throughout the universe, whether it was the lower realm or the immortal court. When it came to the care of the younger generation, they were far more practical than the poor swordsman. How could the 3 pure ones not judge the changes of the universe's cultivation situation before and after the change of era? They were very clear about the biggest trouble their seeds might encounter during this period. It was the final struggle of some unruly immortals from the immortal court. Therefore, the countermeasures had been secretly arranged. Unlike the ancient blood immortal rock and other immortals who were jumping around happily, the three pure ones were as low-key as ever. But many arrangements had been made long ago, including a series of treasures, which were distributed like flowing water. This was the foundation of the orthodox Taoism. It was not luck that they could maintain the overlord position in the universe's cultivation world for millions of years. It was the same for Shi's Supreme. Smashing you to death with treasures was not a joke. There really was such a thing. It was not like the street goods that Yang Xiaoi got from the immortal court. They were all developed by the three pure ones for the lower realm and could be fully utilized. The star-fixing bead was one of these countless types. It was specially designed to disrupt the formation of immortal formations and cut off the connection between the chaotic power of the stars. Of course, it wouldn't last for too long, especially when the opponent was very powerful and had the battle consciousness of an immortal. The 9-sparkle star formation had just been formed, and it was already a little messed up by the star positioning bead. However, the ancient blood ancestral sorcerer reacted very quickly. Under the guidance and coordination of the greedy wolf, the 9-sparkle star positioning bead was shaken into powder. She threw out another rainbow ribbon and fixed the 9 luminaries in place. The poorest of the 3 was Smoky, but she was also the one with the sharpest attacks. Ever since Qing Xian started smashing the treasures, her Sword River had never stopped. While the Sword River was crazily attacking, the other 2 began to look for an opportunity to make a sneak attack. Following the principle of killing as many as they could, they instantly formed a joint attack on an ancient blood ancestral shaman. The treasures had never stopped in the sky. They would appear one every few breaths. They were strange, but their power was incomparably great. These ancient blood ancestral magi immediately understood what was going on. It was the same as their experience in the immortal court. It was the work of those sanctimonious old cows' noses. They had perfectly passed down the true essence of Taoism's battle to the lower realm. They were generally shameless. After Qing Xian and Shi showed their family background, the situation began to change. On the one hand, the 3 of them cooperated seamlessly. On the other hand, it was difficult to completely eliminate the aftereffects of the 9 ancient blood ancestral shamans after the fusion of their blood and spirit. It was about the fight for the body. One body with 2 consciousnesses trying to command it. One could imagine what the consequences would be. In such a chaos, Lu Xiyuan, Lian Zhen, and Yu Bai were killed. In the process, Smoky and Shi also died once. Only then did Tan Lang react. He looked carefully and saw that Qing Xian's eyes were green, like a pair of green eyes. Wherever his gaze shone, it had a natural separation effect on the consciousness that was not refined enough. Shi's body did not have any abnormalities, but there was an extremely hazy mist forming under his crotch. He was smoking while fighting. It was just that this smoke was too thin and was covered by the light of the 9 luminaries, so it was not discovered for a while. This mist had no other effect except to stimulate the primitive power of the blood in the cultivator's body. In theory, it was beneficial to them. However, if their blood was composed of 2 parts, the benefits were not as good as the disadvantages. The blood of the ancestral shamans began to recover, and there was resistance to the control of the ancient blood. The 2 Taoists, one of them secretly attacked the spirit and the other secretly attacked the blood. No one knew where they got so many things to target them. In fact, for the power of the powerful system, it was not new to do preventive research on the more important forces in the immortal court and study some special targeted moves. There were more than 10 immortals in the ancient blood orthodoxy, and they were more fearless in the immortal court. How could the Taoists let go of their ability? It was a treasure that was specially developed to target them. There was nothing wrong with taking it out and using it now. Qing Xian and Shi did not take it out at the beginning because they were worried that the other party's fighting spirit was not strong enough and they would disperse after suffering a loss. Then, the three of them would have a lot of trouble here. They had to wait until these ancient blood ancestral shamans made up their minds, such as now. These objects were not so powerful to the ordinary ancestral shamans because these ordinary ancestral shamans did not have the ability of the ancient blood ancestral shamans. Even so, the three of them had to pay a huge price. When Greed discovered their secret technique, he let out a howl and the remaining 6 ancestral sorcerers scattered in all directions, breaking away from the malicious division of their spirit and bloodline that Greed had inflicted on them. Qing Xian stopped his 2 companions who were fighting excitedly. Don't be impulsive. Your past and future have been exposed. If the other party focuses on one of you, the consequences will be unimaginable. Shi, set up that safe house of yours. Qing Xian was very clear. Although the three of them had achieved an amazing record of 3 kills in this 3 versus 9 battle, they had lost the possibility of being reborn. Now, the three of them were the same. They could not be reborn after death. It was not worth it until the last moment to fight. Yan Chang was a little unwilling. In fact, most of them have been killed by us. They can see us clearly and we can see them clearly too. Shi also said, when 2 armies meet, the brave will win. If we charge forward, who knows if they'll back off. After all, if we die, we are only a half immortal of 3,000 years. If they die, their lives of millions of years will end. They won't dare. Qing Xian disagreed. You can't compare like this. In my opinion, our lives are more valuable than theirs. They have no future, but our future is unlimited. He wanted to bring his companions out. This was his belief. Chapter 24:15. After the first contact, the 2 sides formed an awkward situation where they feared each other. In the short but intense battle just now, both sides had their gains and losses. But in the end, almost everyone present had lost the protection of their past and future reincarnations. Everyone had been killed, so the next battle was really a matter of life and death. No one was not afraid. No one was willing. But they had to pretend that they were not afraid. The 3 of them were not afraid? Were they so unhesitant? Did they not care about their lives? Were they willing to sacrifice themselves to drag the immortals down? The new era was coming, and they were only 1 step away. This was the luck that countless proud sons of heaven did not have. Were they going to risk it just like that? Yan and Shi's impulsive performance was just a gesture because they wanted to put pressure on the other side because they knew that Qing Xian would stop them in the end. By the same logic, if Yan and Qing Xian rushed out, then the one who stood out to sing the opposite tune would definitely be Shi. It was just a stage play. The only thing they did not dare to do was to act impulsively at the same time because they did not trust this senior sister. If this senior sister followed them while waving her flying sword, how could they get off the stage? They were acting, and so were the ancient blood ancestral witch. It was like 2 sides pointing guns at each other, but no one dared to shoot first. As long as there was an impulse, there would be a scene of corpses everywhere. The first half of the real martial arts play was ruined because they did not expect the orthodox Taoist to be so shameless. They had long been on guard against their ancient blood Taoism and even gave them treasures that were completely targeted. But they had to act well in the later part of the play. There was no doubt about the strength of these 3 people. It was impossible to rely on the advantage of 6 people against 3 people without any losses. Because of their endless treasures, if they really fought with their lives, at least 2 or 3 of them would have to die here, which was beyond their psychological tolerance. The immortal court had lived for millions of years, and no immortals said that they were tired of living. Each of them had a stronger desire to live than the cultivators of the lower realm. Only mortals would talk about life and death lightly because they did not know the brilliance of this universe. When you saw more and experienced more, no one was willing to give up such a cultivation world. The key was that they actually had other ways to deal with these three people. This was the ancient filth earth, and there were dozens of ancestral shamans. They were all half immortals, and if they died once, they would have a chance to be reborn. As long as they surrounded them and risked being killed once, how could the three of them survive? There wouldn't be any real losses. If he was slashed once, he could just retreat. Therefore, the 6 ancient blood ancestral magi sent out a message, hoping that the ancestral magi who were watching from the back could come and help. But to their disappointment, the message was like a stone sinking into the sea. There was not a single reply. Until an ancestral sorcerer who came out of the prayer wheel hurriedly replied, "Shit, Lu is here. He is destroying the foundation of the filthy earth," the purple gas. Therefore, there would be no reinforcements. This put the 6 ancient blood ancestral magi in a dilemma. The situation was unavoidably going out of control. Qin Xian helped them make the choice. Let's fly towards Eddy Earth continent. Let's see if they're trying to stop us. At this crucial moment, Qin Xian's decision was crucial. He might not have Lu Xiaoyi's powerful and abnormal ability, but in terms of judgment, he was the kind of person who would seek riches and honor amidst danger. He could see very clearly that the ancient blood ancestral magi opposite them must be waiting for something in the confrontation. There was no other possibility other than the reinforcements from the Eddy Earth ancestral magi. If these people really made a move, they would be doomed eternally. There was no need to think about it, they just had to risk their lives. But now those ancestral magi had not arrived. Either they were unwilling to participate in the hunt, or something had happened in the Eddy Earth. No matter what, they should fight for the initiative instead of waiting here foolishly. He was too clear about the changes in people's hearts. Some persistence could not last long. They must take advantage of the time when the ordinary ancestral magi were wavering to exert influence on them, and not wait for the ancient blood ancestral magi to have a glib tongue. They couldn't hide just because they were afraid of the other party. The more afraid you were, the more certain things would come. Staying in this space and waiting for the other party to be kind? That was the road to certain death. When they advanced, the ancient blood ancestral magi retreated, forming a strange confrontation scene. She was curious. Do you think those ancestral magi will avoid the battle because they are afraid of offending the mainstream Taoism? Qin Xian sneered. These ancient blood ancestral magi are trapped in this space. Their vision is the characteristic of a rat. They want to take advantage of the situation, but they don't want to take the karma. How can there be such a good thing? But I don't think they have such determination. The reason why they don't come must be that there is a problem with the Eddy Earth. There is no coincidence in this world. How can it be so coincidental that we fell into the trap here and there is a problem with the Eddy Earth? That guy is a dog. Wherever there is shit, he will follow the smell. There is no place he doesn't dare to come. So I say you two should take it easy. Everyone has to be neat. Their speed was not fast. They maintained the most basic speed of confrontation. No one wanted to cause the other party to misunderstand because of some excessive action. Both sides were aware that they had backup. Now they came to see what happened in the Eddy Earth. Then they saw a shocking scene happening in the prayer wheel. Dozens of ancestral magi took turns to throw themselves into the prayer wheel. They died dauntlessly and continued to throw themselves into the prayer wheel after being reborn. The 3 of them did not see Lu Xiaoyi. Naturally, they set their eyes on the prayer wheel. She laughed. What is this? It is like a merry-go-round. Is this the training mode of the ancestral magi? Is it too hot-blooded? No, there is something in the prayer wheel. A little person was running in the prayer wheel. Every time he jumped in the air, he would make all kinds of exaggerated and funny poses. He would either spread his arms to face the wind, stand on one leg, spread his wings like a white crane, or draw his bow sideways. It could be seen that he was not killing, but enjoying. A madman who had already treated killing as enjoyment. This was the gap between the three of them and his companion. It was just a game. When a swordsman no longer cared about life and death and only indulged his talent in running, nothing could stop him. That was another realm of battle. Qing Xian, why are these people so willing to cooperate with him? Isn't it obvious that they are sending themselves to death? Shi, should we remind these idiots? Dozens of people are not enough to exhaust that madman to death. We have to get the exterior Master Tian here. Yen Chong, this bastard. Is he going to save us? Or are we going to save him? Soon, the three of them felt the mysterious power in the prayer wheel. Although they did not know what it was, their intuition was that Xiaoyi must have grasped the weak spot of the ancestral magi of the Eddy Earth. This guy had such talent. Chapter 24:16. They were newcomers, so they didn't know what they were supposed to do here. Qing Xian and the rest did not know because they knew that they did not need to go in to help that lunatic. That guy was having fun by himself. Moreover, they were outsiders here and might not be able to enter. The ancient blood ancestral witch did not know what to do. The ancestral witch of Earth obviously could not take care of them. Should they go in to protect the purple gas or continue to confront the three troublesome guys? It happened so suddenly that they did not have time to think about it. However, as they were all in the half-immortal realm, they came up with a feasible plan in an instant. 5 ancestral sorcerers who had been badly injured were transferred to monitor Qing Xian and the other 2, while 6 ancestral sorcerers of ancient blood went in to help the Edo Earth to eliminate the crazy sword cultivator. In the words of the oldest ancestral witch, each of them had died at least 7 or 8 times. That swordsman's limit was probably here. As long as they sent in a few more reinforcements, because of the frequent deaths in battle, the combat power of these ancestral witches was not as good as before. They needed the help of the ancestral witch of Earth. The condition was that as long as the ancestral witch of Earth helped them solve the problem in the prayer wheel, they would help the ancestral witch of Earth to deal with the 3 Taoists. After weighing the pros and cons, the 6 ancestral witch of Earth quickly agreed to their request. Because if they did not agree, the other half of the consciousness in their body would never cooperate with them. The new era was not far away, and they did not have time to slowly integrate and digest it. The key point was that even if they were killed in the prayer wheel, their lives would not be in danger. Yen Tu's pretty face was filled with anger. Her flying sword jumped out and she was ready to attack. She was also silently preparing. Both of them could not accept putting all the pressure on their companions while they watched from the outside. Qing Xian said in a low voice, "Can the 2 of you listen to me? I have known Xiaoyi for nearly 3,000 years and have experienced countless life and death situations. The only thing that has not changed in the past 3,000 years is that he has never dropped the ball in difficult situations. Furthermore, many of the dangers were intentional. Think about it. Senior sister, at that time, the only one who believed in him was you. Even I had to prepare for the future. But in the end, you were right. We should not have doubted him. It was the same this time. We should believe in him as always. None of the ancestral sorcerers here could defeat him in a one-on-one fight. It didn't matter if they had ancient blood or not. Leave it to him. Trust him." It was rare for Qing Xian to speak so solemnly. What he was really worried about was that, if these ancestral shamans were to change their minds and change their strategy, they would be in real trouble. If these ancestral sorcerers were more courageous, all of them would withdraw from the prayer wheel and turn to deal with the three of them, using their lives to threaten Xiaoyi. What would happen? The three of them did not have the ability to be reborn. Yan Peng and Shi's past and future had already been revealed. Once the other party recovered from his impulsiveness, the bet on their friendship would definitely succeed. This kind of friendship was rare among practitioners at their level, so the ancestors of sorcery did not think of it for a while. However, they were not fools. Sooner or later they would think of it, especially when they were at the end of their rope. Shi was the first to understand. He sighed and said, "Well, I didn't expect that I would become a burden one day. If the ancestors of sorcery attack us, we will run. We will drag it out as long as we can." Lu Xiaoyi was a little tired. The bottleneck of Yuanli was not something that could be replaced by willpower, especially after killing the ancestors of sorcery, who were also in the half-immortal realm for hundreds of times. The ancestors of sorcery's human wave tactic was not whimsical. It had its own profound reason. Although it was a little stupid, it won in reality. He could look down on these ancestors of sorcery because of his confidence. However, in a real battle, he would go all out every time. This was the basic fighting attitude of a swordsman. There was no such thing as using only a little bit of strength. This kind of calculation was not suitable for a life-and-death battle. The opponent was a living person who could adapt, know how to think, and could improve. They would also gradually improve their close combat ability in the battle. They would be flexible in all kinds of ways, and not just charge forward foolishly. It was very exciting, but also very tiring. The continuous attack of dozens of ancestors of sorcery caused him to rarely have more than 10 breaths of time to rest. After hundreds of such outbursts, it would inevitably lead to the exhaustion of his Yuanli output. The ancestors of sorcery were keenly aware of this. In view of the fact that their strength was not as strong as before after 7 or 8 times of death, they invited the ancient blood ancestors of sorcery as a fresh force. In the current situation, their attitude was already very determined. They were completely on the same side as the ancient blood ancestors of sorcery. However, their primary target was now Lu Xiaoyi, followed by Qing Xian and the other two. Lu Xiaoyi was not worried. His Yuanli was indeed sliding towards a dangerous withered state. However, his sword Dao willpower was getting stronger and stronger. It was close to breaking through the limits of a certain pure spiritual category. Willpower was also a part of a cultivator's overall quality. However, in this cultivation era where the great Tao was rampant, there were very few orthodoxies that insisted on willpower. Cultivators always had countless options to choose from. If one path did not work, they would choose the second path. This quality required one's innate talent, postnatal training, the cooperation of the era, and finally, the sublimation of special circumstances and special events. For example, dozens of half-immortals would help you forge. Willpower was steel, the prayer wheel was fire, and it was a forging room. And these crazy ancestors of sorcery were the hammer and anvil. If he got through it, this experience would be written in his biography, How Steel is Forged. If he could not get through it, the title of the chapter would become, The Influence of Impurities on Steel Forging. In this process, the purple gas might be the blood that the blacksmith spat out at the most critical moment. Unknowingly, he had forced himself into a position where there was no way out. He had long been used to it. This kind of gamble could satisfy the sullen feeling brought about by his usual cautious and slick actions. In order to do something big, he had not completely indulged his mood for the past 3,000 years. Only in this kind of pure tempering of his own body could he be free for once. The breath in front was surprisingly strong. With a slight perception, he knew that it was the fresh force of the ancestors of sorcery. In the end, it was no longer important who it was. To a sword madman who had slashed his opponent hundreds of times, it did not matter who it was. Whoever it was a surprise. The stronger the opponent, the more tenacious his steel would be. What he wanted to know now was, what kind of impact would it have on the battle when the sword Tao willpower was almost condensed into a substance? Chapter 24:17. Opposite him was Army Destroyer. His luck was not bad. He was the first ancient blood ancestral shaman to meet the swordsman when he jumped into the prayer wheel. Outside the prayer wheel, he had already observed the process of the swordsman killing the ancestral shaman a few times. Even though he was not there, he could still see the key points in the process. None of them were a match for the swordsman when it came to close combat technique. This was because they had been away from this kind of fighting style for too long. It was not something that they could pick up in a short period of time. Even if they picked it up, they would still be no match for the swordsman. Therefore, the problem was not this, it was how to rely on the power of the bloodline to turn himself into a flying meteorite. Without fighting techniques, there was no need for techniques. Crash. This kind of method was very stupid when the swordsman was at his peak, because the invincible sword aura could cut through any kind of meteorite. But now, the power of the swordsman's sword was not as strong as before. This was not an inference, it was the result of dozens of ancestral shamans dying hundreds of times. It was credible, real, and could not be faked. He had now turned himself into a meteorite. Without a weapon, his body was a weapon. He did not seek to kill the enemy, he only wanted to knock him out. There were still his companions behind him. This was what Lu Xiaoyi saw in his eyes, a rock that was getting bigger and bigger. It was like a running mountain, carrying the power of heaven and earth as it came crashing over. In the torrent of history, he had nowhere to hide. He did not hide. On the contrary, the sword aura on the sword disappeared and was replaced by the will of the sword after killing hundreds of times. Under the will of the sword, there was no difference between him and the sword. They were one, a will that ran wildly and never compromised. The collision happened in the blink of an eye. However, it was not as earth-shattering as imagined. Instead, it was silent, like a cicada's wing cutting through tofu. Under Lu Xiaoyi's unbridled roar, the meteorite that was reduced to the background was blown into countless pieces, becoming another part of history in the prayer wheel. This was only the beginning. The ancient blood ancestral shamans and ordinary ancestral shamans were still persevering, one after another like moths to a flame. This was their will, the will to protect their homeland. In the prayer wheel, when both sides were exhausted, it became a battle of wills. Lu Xiaoyi unsheathed his sword, and the witches unsheathed their bodies. It was a tragic sight. Outside the prayer wheel, Qing Xian sneered, "How is it? I've said it before, you'll never know where this guy's limit is. Every time you think he is on the brink of death, he turns into a different person." Just like this fellow's position as a bailiff, there are many more positions below him. Smokey sighed as well. She rarely had the chance to observe her junior brother's swordsmanship at close range. In her mind, she was definitely not as good as him, but the gap between them might not be that big. There was no way to compare, because this guy always laughed and fooled her. But now, she knew that the distance between her and Lu Xiaoyi was as far as the distance between her and Li Wuya. She could not even see his back clearly. It was because of this understanding that she had to seriously consider the problem of her own Tao. Although her words were tough, but in the hundreds of years in the land of the Yellow Dragon, she also thoroughly understood that her efforts might be meaningless. To challenge the old reincarnation, her foundation was far from enough, and there was no hope of success. If she wanted to succeed in the challenge, there was no other way except for Lu Xiaoyi. Qing Xian also felt the same. He began to carefully consider his choice. Was it more impulsive or more rational? Heaven's punishment was not something that could be solved by mere emotion. But first, he had to deal with the trouble in front of him. He still had something to say to the 5 witches who had been monitoring them. What's the purpose of risking your life like this? With all due respect, your crisis this time seems to be looking for trouble? The old witch's face was bitter. Fellow Taoist is right. The trouble this time is all because of us. The ancient blood ancestral sorcerer insisted on ending it because he had a grudge with you. Our attitude towards this is neither supportive nor opposed. This is the reason why the 9 of them went to besiege and kill you, while we just watched. Qing Xian shook his head, neither supporting nor opposing? It sounded stable, but in the chaotic period of the change of era, it was the most unacceptable. Under the great change, how could you be indecisive and overcautious? The old witch sighed. I know our attitude is wrong, we shouldn't hesitate in this era, but the specific situation of the earth left us with few choices. So we set up a trap here. As long as someone came in through the Qijing Pure Land, they would be trapped in the prayer wheel and never be able to come out. The result is like this: we succeeded, but we also failed. We solved a problem, but it led to a bigger problem. Qing Xian shook his head. Using the supreme core of the earth to trap a universe-famous shit-stirrer? What are you thinking? What's the difference between this and smashing a robber with a gold brick? Others can't wait to hide, but you, then, is the core of the prayer wheel the legendary purple gas? The old witch's face was bleak. That's right. In the end, he was trapped inside, and he began to attack the purple gas. This is the root of our impure earth. If something happens to the purple gas, impure earth will no longer exist. Being forced to this point, what other choice do I have? Yan Chen disdained. You deserve it. If you had let my junior brother in, the ones who died would only be the 9 ancient blood witches. Can he really dig out your roots? Now you still feel wronged? So my junior brother should sacrifice himself for your obsidian soil? Whose logic is this? She chuckled. This is the end. Valuable things were seen by robbers, as the saying goes. Thieves don't come empty-handed, plucking the feathers of a goose. Think about it. The old witch wanted to cry. Think about it? If you were an earth cultivator, how would you think about it? Can you teach me? Qing Xian stared at him. Fellow Taoist, you still don't seem to know where the root of all this is? Us? Little e? Ancient blood? The old witch raised his head. What do you mean? Qing Xian smiled slightly. The real reason is your Earth strategy to deal with the change of era. You want to get a share of the pie when the era changes, but you are worried that the Earth will no longer exist after the new era, so borrowing the power of the ancient blood is actually the biggest mistake. Yan Chen looked at him and smiled at Shi. At this time, the elegant Taoist elite in front of him turned into a proper liar, just like Lu Xiaoyi when he was smiling. Qing Xian waved his hand. You don't understand. The biggest feature of the new era is the fusion of the universe. Instead of standing on a small mountain and isolating yourself from the mainstream, you have a future with the help of the ancient blood? They are the same as you, abandoned by the times. What qualitative change can there be when 2 of them are together? They are both abandoned and have no achievements in the new era. What's the point of such cooperation? Others are looking for a vigorous force to cooperate, but you are good, a stinky fish looking for rotten shrimp. Chapter 24:18. These words were unpleasant to hear, but the old witch was old after all. Her self-restraint was amazing. Of course, she did not have the qualifications to lose her temper. What do you mean? Qing Xian sneered. In the cultivation world, there is never a future waiting for you, there is only hope to fight for. What are you afraid of? Hiding in a corner like the filthy earth for millions of years? Afraid of being beaten up when you go out? Being robbed? Being looked down upon? The heavenly Tao has given you millions of years to go out and see the world and truly integrate yourselves with the mainstream of cultivation. From now on, you will have me, and he will have me. This is the true foothold in the cultivation world. The smoke puppet behind her curled her lips and transmitted to Shi, "You have me, and I have him? I am afraid that in the end it will become your Taoist." Shi laughed dryly. An analogy, an analogy. In fact, everyone will become relatives. Qing Xian turned back and glared at the two, then turned back and continued to deceive. The real eternity is only one point: integration. Integration into the mainstream. In this integration, strengthen yourself and accept others, instead of closing the door here and thinking that you are the orthodox of heaven and earth. Instead of relying on a wisp of purple gas to obtain eternal peace. This kind of thinking is not true of cultivation. The change of era gave you one last chance. If you don't go out, you will never be able to go out again. The earth will become history, and you leaders will be the sinners of the earth. The smoke puppet behind her continued to quietly complain, avoiding the important and dwelling on the trivial, pointing at the sky and painting a pie. Now you think about it, what's the use of going out? Tens of thousands of years ago was more like it. If you go out now, you will die faster. She smiled. It's not death, it's integration. You have me, and in the end, you will become me. The old witch looked at him quietly, still calm. Good mouth. But I want to know now, is it possible that you all have good intentions, destroying my earth purple gas for a better future? Qing Xian looked at him calmly. Tao friend, it hasn't been destroyed yet. You can't use things that haven't happened to judge the future. This is too wishful thinking. The old witch stared at him. You have said so much, I understand the meaning behind it. If after this incident, Guardian Lu is fine, and the purple gas is normal, then we will definitely consider what you said. Including walking out of this world. Including not cooperating with the ancient bloodline immortal lineage anymore. However, if either escort Lu or Purple Chi is injured, then there is no possibility of continuing. We all understand this. The old cultivator closed his eyes and didn't say anything. Obviously, he was tired of the Taoists' preaching. As an old cultivator who had lived for over 10,000 years, he had his own wisdom and wouldn't be so easily persuaded by a few words. Qing Xian's expression did not change. She did not feel bored by her words at all. Behind her, Yan Qiong mocked. What? He didn't succeed? Had he been seen through? It's obviously a dead end, yet you still want to waste your breath. It was all a fluke. Just wait. Once little E destroys the purple clouds, it will naturally be simple. We still have to go through this. However, she had a different opinion. Not necessarily. At the very least, he had planted a thorn in the old man's heart. Sooner or later, I'll make him uneasy. Qing Xian chuckled. This old man's condition seems a little impossible, but it might not be so. Little E will be fine. That's for sure. I don't think that strand of purple gas can do anything either. Maybe everything will be fine? Yan Qiong did not believe. Impossible. Little E would never come out empty-handed in such a situation. Even in the cave, he would have taken advantage of it, let alone this strand of purple gas. Qing Xian was unfathomable. You're wrong. There's a problem. If a bandit found the landlord's gold vault, what would he do? There are two ways. The bandit would take it all in one go and it would be gone. In the future, it might even attract the attention of the authorities. But the old bandit wouldn't do that. He would secretly dig a hole under the gold vault and steal a bit at a time. He wouldn't reveal anything. This way, the landlord would continue to put it in while the old bandit would quietly move it out. Not only would he get more, the authorities wouldn't even know who did it. Little E, is it a bandit or an old bandit? She chuckled. Of course it's an old bandit who can't be any older. And that strand of purple gas is too powerful. He can't swallow it. Ma Lu, what you mean is, we can reconcile with them and then dig a hole? Qing Xian did not admit it. What hole? It's a hole they dug for themselves, okay? It's just that it's too old and they can't climb out anymore. We still have to be prepared for battle. I see that these ancestral shamans are hovering between life and death inside. It's hard to say how much fighting power they have left. But once little E can come out, we have to hold him back. We must not commit a massacre in the earth. Don't look at the strength of the cultivators here. They involve a lot of people. If we don't handle it well, we'll be stained with shit. She nodded. Yan Cheng was still a little confused. Isn't this place forgotten by the mainstream cultivation world? What kind of trouble can there be? Qing Xian explained, the cultivators of the earth aren't troublesome. The troublesome thing is that strand of purple gas. It's one of the 13 strands of purple gas when the chaos first opened. I heard from the ancient records that there's a saying that the 3 strands of purple gas transformed from 3 of the 13 strands of purple gas. Then what does this strand of purple gas that didn't transform mean? Is it the 4th Hong Hong Mao or something else? No one can say for sure. But no matter how you look at it, since it's the land transformed by the 13 strands of purple gas, it's best to let it live and die on its own. We can play the side drum and come up with some good ideas. Just don't go into battle personally. The outcome is unpredictable. Killing the ancient blood ancestral shamans is an advantage. Quit while you're ahead. That's the right thing to do. Of course, in the end, we have to solve the problem of the ancestral shamans targeting us. Otherwise, we have countless things to do. Who will always guard against them? Yan Cheng was interested. Regarding the origin of the universe, there were some unknown secret. No orthodoxy was clearer than the orthodox Taoism, like the 3 pure ones. 13 strands of purple gas? 4 of them became the rules of the 4 strands of heaven and earth. What about the other 9 strands? She answered her, as far as I know, there are many versions. But the version that's faintly circulated at the highest level of Taoism is 1 strand of time, 1 strand of space, 1 strand of celestial phenomenon, 1 strand of life, 1 strand of the 36 days, 1 strand of the past, 1 strand of the present, 1 strand of the future. As for the last strand, I don't know. There are many different opinions and no conclusion can be reached. Qing Xian nodded. Well, Taoism's circulation in this aspect is similar. Of course, Buddhism is another saying. There's no need to delve into it. Yan Cheng was a little confused. It's messed up, it's all messed up. The strand of life should be the Tao of creation, right? The strand of celestial phenomenon should be the 5 elements. If that's the case, time, space, 5 elements, and creation should be respected in the innate Tao. But the fact is, morality, fate, and karma have been squeezed into it. What's the reason? Qing Xian sighed. Morality, fate, karma, they're all the Tao of life. The more prosperous the human race is, the more needs there are in this aspect. In fact, many of the theories of cultivation at the beginning of heaven and earth are vague and even contradictory. This isn't strange because cultivation only started gradually from ancient times. The ancient times are a mystery to everyone. Without personal experience, who can say it clearly? Chapter 24:19. P.S. Sir D. Duo is on the shelf today, please help him. Lu Xiaoyi's will of the sword continued to rise as he killed more and more people. Was there an upper limit to the will? No one knew. How to measure it? Lu Xiaoyi knew. Let's see who you kill. Of course, it was definitely not a demigod, because the number of demigods that were killed had almost exceeded 4 digits. It could no longer be used as a standard to measure his will. The legs of the ordinary ancestral witches were weak. The scene of vitality when they were reborn was no longer there. Messing around, dragging their feet, reluctantly, and making do with each other. This was the current reality of the ancestral magi. They did not dare to stop. They were afraid that the swordsman would destroy the purple gas. When would it end? They knew that the hope was getting slimmer and slimmer, but the ancestral witches still tried their best to persevere. The meaning of perseverance was that the swordsman would collapse due to exhaustion. They no longer expected to achieve results in the battle. Including the 6 fresh troops, the result was the same when the ancient blood ancestral witches rushed forward. It did not reflect the uniqueness of the ancient blood celestial species. The most fatal thing was that there was a crack between the ordinary ancestral witches and the ancient blood ancestral witches. The reason was simple. The ordinary ancestral witches rushed in twice in such a difficult situation, but the ancient blood ancestral witches only went in once. Everything was slow. The rebirth was slow and the action was slow. The ancient blood ancestral witches could not be blamed because they still needed to guard against the 3 Taoists outside the prayer wheel. However, the ordinary ancestral witches would not think so. They would only think that these ancient blood celestial species were not willing to fight to the death and disregard the safety of the earth. The position was different, the goal was different, the focus of the action was different. This was the meaning of Qing Xian and the other 2 taking the risk to stand here. Even if they didn't do anything, they still affected something. Without a specific strategy, Lu Xiaoyi did what he should do based on his intuition, and so did Qing Xian and the other 2. Their intuition and accurate judgment in a complex environment slowly began to lead the situation in their favor after the initial chaos. This was something that had been tempered through countless life and death situations. It couldn't be taught or learned. It could only be experienced by oneself. When you experience it and survive it, all of these experiences can help you get on the right path in a complicated situation. Lu Xiaoyi no longer had a sword in his hand. He had already put the 7 ants back into his mud ball. With the support of his sword intent, he himself was a sword, the sharpest sword. The ancestral sorcerers that were charging towards them started to scatter. This was because the ancient blood ancestral sorcerers wanted to protect themselves, and because the ordinary ancestral sorcerers were exhausted. The less people he killed, the slower the increase in his will of sword Dao. This was something that couldn't be forced. From the beginning until now, he had killed more than 1,000 ancestral shamans. On average, each ancestral shaman was killed 20 to 30 times. With such a high frequency, even half-immortals couldn't withstand it. The first spurt of energy had been exhausted, and now the second was weakening, and the third was about to be exhausted. At this moment, he felt that his will of sword Dao had reached an unprecedented height. It was the peak of his more than 3,000 years of cultivation. In the foreseeable future, it might be difficult to have such a coincidence to help him condense his will of sword Dao. This was a rare opportunity. He focused his consciousness in the direction of the purple gas and brazenly stabbed it. No one dared to be so reckless. It could even be said that it was a brainless performance. He didn't know what would happen if he stabbed the purple gas. The collapse of the prayer wheel was inevitable, and the consequences would be the huge Earth continent and the countless humans living on it. But he couldn't hold it back. There must be such a stab. It was also his last attempt. The purple gas trembled slightly under the will of sword Dao. The entire prayer wheel spun crazily as if it had lost its speed. Except for Lu Xiaoyi, all the ancestral sorcerers of Earth, excluding the ancient blood, were thrown out by the powerful centrifugal force. Then, they could no longer enter. Dozens of ancestral sorcerers silently watched the prayer wheel spinning crazily on the verge of losing its speed. It was so fast that it seemed like the historical totems were about to be thrown out. Would it be the end of the ancient Earth continent? There were already ancestral sorcerers who looked at the 3 of them with hatred. They couldn't do anything to Lu Xiaoyi, but at least they could do something to his friends. Qing Xian spread out his hands and made an apologetic gesture. Wait a little longer? Control your ancestral sorcerers, they shouldn't be impulsive when they should be, and not be calm when they should be calm? It's just a little longer. His eyes turned cold. Please forgive me for being blunt. Your decision will determine the future of the Earth continent. The old ancestral sorcerer turned his head with difficulty. In the prayer wheel, there were fluctuations of spiritual vigor from the dead cultivators and the vitality of the cultivators when they were reborn. One after another, it was endless. It was obvious that the swordsman had killed the 6 ancient blood ancestral sorcerers in the prayer wheel. No one knew how he did it, but he could control these people to only be reborn in the prayer wheel. Then, rebirth was death. They went through such a terrifying cycle of life and death in the crazy rotation. The old ancestral sorcerer covered his face in pain, but he could not block out the aura of death that kept coming out. He regretted it. If he could do it all over again, he would never agree with these ancient blood ancestral sorcerers to provoke this perverted madman, including his friends. Only those who had experienced it personally would know how terrifying this person was. Other than the immortals from the upper realm, no one could control this swordsman. What should he do? In such anxiety, the Taoist priest's gentle voice sounded in his ears like a devil. A depressed person only sees difficulties, but an optimist will always see hope. Why did he only throw you out? Why did he only leave those ancient blood ancestral sorcerers? Does this represent some kind of attitude? Since he has such an attitude, maybe it means that he doesn't have the intention to kill all of the Earth continent sorcerers? Since he doesn't want to kill all of them, then there shouldn't be any problems with the purple chi? If you think this way, won't you feel better in your heart? The old ancestral sorcerer was confused and nodded involuntarily. What else could he think other than this? There was no point in killing these 3 Taoists now. The key was that the purple chi could not be damaged. The Earth continent could not be destroyed in the hands of their generation. Behind him, Yanqing secretly transmitted a message. I think that this is purely because Little E didn't have the confidence to take down all of the Earth continent sorcerers, so he could only steal from the ancient blood ancestral sorcerers who are the biggest threat. Are they stupid? How can they believe such a shallow lie? Qing Xian was speechless. Senior sister, great aunt, can you not speak the truth? Beside him, Shishi laughed. A drowning person will grab onto even a stalk of grass tightly. Can a straw save them? No, it is a kind of spiritual sustenance. Senior sister, when people are helpless, they will always look for such sustenance. You have to understand them. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.